Welcome back. This is Midnight Crime. Most of you fall asleep before the end, so hit subscribe now so you don't miss tomorrow's case. And before we begin, what time is it where you are, and where in the world are you tuning in from? Alright, let's head straight into our first story. Story 1. Lisa Ray checked the locks on her patio doors and closed the heavy blackout curtains for the night. She didn't notice that the person she had been chatting with online was parked in her driveway. She didn't notice the faint smell of cigarette smoke drifting from the guest bedroom. Lisa turned off the kitchen light. It was actually the last night she would spend there. When the police finally entered 10 days later, the kettle was still sitting on the stove, cold and dry. Detective James Hartley stood in the kitchen doorway, waiting for the photographer to finish. The kettle sat on the front left burner, its spout pointing toward the window. The stove's digital display was dark, no power running to it, which meant the circuit breaker had been switched or the outlet itself had failed. He would check both. The house smelled like stagnation. 10 days of no air circulation, no fresh water, no human activity. The peculiar sweetness of slow decay was absent, which told him the house had been sealed effectively. No open food, no bodies. That was one piece of information. The kettle itself was unremarkable, a standard stainless steel model, the kind found in thousands of homes. He photographed its position relative to the burner knob. The knob was in the off position. He turned it gently. It clicked forward with no resistance. The burner element beneath the kettle showed no heat damage, no residue, no indication it had ever been switched on. Hartley moved through the first floor methodically. Living room, television off, remote control on the side table aligned parallel to the table's edge. Furniture arranged in a way that suggested regular use. No overturned chairs. No signs of struggle. The television's remote was checked for fingerprints later. He made a note of it. The kitchen trash contained 2 coffee cups, a yogurt container with a date code indicating it expired 6 days before Lisa Ray disappeared, and a receipt from a grocery store dated 3 days before her last night in the house. He bagged these items. In the hallway leading to the bedrooms, Hartley observed the wall switch for the hallway light. He flipped it. The light came on. The electrical system was functional. He flipped it off again. The master bedroom showed the most immediate signs of habitation. A bed was made. The duvet pulled to the headboard. On the nightstand, a glass of water, completely empty, the interior showing a ring of mineral deposits. This meant it had been filled, consumed, and never refilled. Hartley noted the thickness of the dust on the nightstand's surface, approximately 2 millimeters, suggesting the water glass had been undisturbed for the full 10 days. The guest bedroom door was closed. Hartley opened it slowly. The room smelled different. Not decay, but something else, something chemical and faint, nearly imperceptible. Cigarette smoke. He documented this observation. The guest room contained a single bed, a dresser, and a closet. On the floor, near the window, were 2 cigarette butts, both filtered, both showing signs of having been smoked completely down to the filter. He photographed them in place before bagging them. The filter paper showed no lipstick marks. The window itself bore significance. Hartley ran his hand along the sill. Dust covered most of it, but there was a clear area, a rectangular space approximately 15 centimeters wide, where something had rested. The dust on either side was undisturbed. Whatever had been there had been placed after the room had begun accumulating dust, then removed before the police entered. He examined the window lock. It was in the closed position. He pulled up on the frame. It moved easily, suggesting the lock was decorative rather than functional. The exterior showed no tool marks on the frame. No pry damage. The closet held nothing but hangers. Back in the kitchen, Hartley turned his attention to the surfaces. The countertops showed no mail, no dishes, no clutter. He opened the drawers. Utensils in the first drawer were arranged in dividers. The second drawer held kitchen towels, folded. The third drawer, near the stove, contained cooking utensils. Everything was organized. The refrigerator held the kind of contents one would expect from someone leaving for a period of time. Condiments, a half-full carton of milk dated for consumption 3 weeks after she disappeared, a container of butter, 3 eggs in a carton. No fresh vegetables, no fresh fruit. He took photographs of the interior with the door open, then closed it to preserve whatever evidence the food might have contained. The dining room table was clean. A chair was pushed in at one end. 3 other chairs were properly positioned around the table. Upstairs, in the office, Hartley found a laptop on the desk. The device was in sleep mode. When he moved the mouse, the screen remained dark. He did not attempt to wake it. That would be handled by the tech team. But he noted the position of the laptop, centered on the desk, with a mouse pad to its right and nothing else in the immediate vicinity. The desk drawers contained office supplies, pens, paper clips, a stapler, notepads. One drawer held financial documents, bank statements, sorted by date, spanning the previous 6 months. He reviewed them without removing them from the drawer. The most recent statement was dated 2 days before Lisa Ray's last night in the house. Transaction records showed regular deposits and routine withdrawals. No unusual activity. No large cash withdrawals. No transfers to unknown accounts. In the bedroom closet, Hartley found Lisa Ray's clothing arranged by category. Shirts in one section, pants in another, dresses on a separate rod. Shoes lined the floor. He observed that a section of empty hangers existed between the dresses and the pants, approximately 4 hangers worth of space. He photographed this gap from multiple angles. The bathroom medicine cabinet contained prescription bottles. He photographed the labels and dates. The prescriptions had been filled regularly and showed appropriate medication counts based on dosage schedules. No bottles were empty. No bottles showed signs of rapid consumption. The shower curtain was transparent plastic. The tub was clean. A bar of soap sat in a dish. The soap appeared dry. On the bathroom sink, a hairbrush sat next to a glass of water. The glass, like the one in the bedroom, was empty but showed mineral deposits. The hairbrush contained strands of dark hair, approximately 30 strands, which would be collected for DNA analysis. Hartley proceeded to the guest bathroom. This room showed less use. The sink was clean. No glasses of water. No hairbrush. The medicine cabinet was empty except for a single bottle of pain medication, unopened, with a date from 2 years prior. Back downstairs, in the basement, Hartley found a storage area with cardboard boxes labeled and dated. Most contained seasonal items or archive documents. One box, however, was newer. The cardboard still held its shape and showed no dust accumulation. The label read, "Guest Supplies," in handwriting that matched the grocery store receipt. The box contained linens, towels, and a pillow. In the utility room, the circuit breaker panel was mounted on the wall. All breakers were in the on position. He photographed each one. The main door to the house showed no signs of forced entry. The lock was a standard deadbolt with no scratches around the keyhole. The door frame was intact. The sliding patio door in the living room had 2 locks, one on the handle, one manual rod lock in the track. Both were engaged. The glass was clean. The blackout curtains behind the glass were drawn completely. Hartley stood in the kitchen again as the afternoon light began to fade. The kettle remained on the stove. The police had not moved it. It sat there the way Lisa Ray had left it 10 days ago, and used, cold, waiting for water that never came. The evidence would be cataloged separately. The cigarette butts would be analyzed. The water glasses would be tested for residue. The dust patterns would be mapped. The laptop would be examined. The financial records would be reviewed by a specialist. The hair from the brush would be profiled. But in this moment, standing in the silent kitchen, Hartley understood that Lisa Ray had not left the house on her own. Someone else had left it for her. The tech team extracted the laptop's hard drive on the second day. Detective Hartley sat in the evidence room while Officer Linda Reeves walked through the file structure, her fingers moving methodically across the keyboard. The machine had been password protected. The IT specialist had bypassed the lock in 43 minutes. The browser history showed activity consistent with the days leading up to the disappearance. Social media sites, news outlets, a streaming service, shopping sites. Nothing unusual until the search history from 7 days before the last night. A gap of 3 days with no activity whatsoever. The logs indicated the machine had been powered off during that period. When the activity resumed, the search terms changed. Instead of shopping sites and news, there were searches for real estate listings in 3 neighboring counties. Searches for property tax records. Searches for mortgage information. The pattern continued for 4 days, then stopped again. The last recorded activity was a login to the bank's website at 3:28 p.m. on the day Lisa Ray left her kettle on the stove. Reeves printed the timestamps. Hartley reviewed the transaction log from the bank statement he had photographed in the desk. The 3:28 p.m. login corresponded to a review of account balance only. No transactions were initiated. The account balance shown in the login session was $847,000. The bank statement from 2 days before showed $894,000. Hartley requested the complete transaction history from the bank. It arrived the next morning in a sealed envelope marked confidential. The $47,000 withdrawal had occurred in 2 transfers. One for $30,000 at 2:15 p.m. on the day of her disappearance, the second for $17,000 at 2:47 p.m. the same day. Both were wire transfers to an account at a different bank. Both transfers showed as completed. The receiving bank was in a different state. Hartley submitted a warrant request. The response came back within 6 hours. The receiving account had been opened 4 days before the first wire transfer. It was opened under the name Jennifer Aldridge, with an address listed as a commercial mail center 2 towns over. The account received the $47,000 in wire transfers. On the same day, at 4:12 p.m., the full amount was withdrawn in cash. No further activity occurred in the account. Hartley drove to the mail center. It was a franchise operation in a strip mall, the kind that rents mailboxes and provides package receiving services. The manager, a woman named Dorothy Pearson, reviewed the rental agreement for box 447. The agreement had been signed by Jennifer Aldridge on the same date the bank account was opened. The address provided on the application was a residential address, one that Hartley confirmed, after running the property records, belonged to a house 3 blocks from where Lisa Ray lived. He drove past the address. The house appeared vacant. No vehicle in the driveway. The grass had not been mowed in at least 2 weeks. Curtains were drawn on all visible windows. Back at the station, Hartley requested surveillance footage from the commercial mail center. The manager provided a hard drive containing 3 weeks of security recordings. The footage was reviewed frame by frame. On the date the box was rented, a man entered the facility at 1:47 p.m. He was dressed in dark clothing. The camera captured his face, a direct angle, unobstructed. Height approximately 180 centimeters. Build lean. A scar visible on his left cheekbone, approximately 3 centimeters in length. He completed the rental agreement and left at 2:03 p.m., carrying nothing. 2 days later, the same man entered the facility at 3:15 p.m. He approached box 447, inserted a key, and removed a cash envelope. The envelope appeared thick. He placed it in an interior jacket pocket and left at 3:19 p.m. 3 days after that, a woman entered at 2:51 p.m. She was dressed in business casual attire, a blazer and slacks. Her hair was pulled back in a bun. She approached the counter and spoke with the manager for approximately 4 minutes. The conversation was inaudible on the recording, but the manager nodded and handed her a form. The woman completed the form, signed the signature line, and left at 3:08 p.m. The form she signed was later identified as a forwarding address request for box 447. Hartley requested the forwarding address from the manager. She consulted her system. The new address was a P.O. box at a postal facility in a town 180 kilometers away. Forensics processed the pen used to complete the rental agreement and the withdrawal form. Fingerprints were lifted from both documents. The prints from the rental agreement matched a database record, a man named David Brockwell, with a prior conviction for fraud in another state 7 years prior. The prints from the withdrawal form were unidentified. A photograph of David Brockwell was run through facial recognition software and cross-referenced with surveillance footage from traffic cameras on the route between Lisa Ray's neighborhood and the mail center. For separate cameras had captured a vehicle matching the description Lisa Ray's neighbors had reported seeing in her driveway. The vehicle appeared in footage on 2 separate dates: the day the mail center box was rented and the day the cash was withdrawn. The license plate was obscured by intentional dirt application on both recordings. Hartley obtained a warrant for David Brockwell's residence. The house 3 blocks from Lisa Ray's home was searched. The interior showed signs of recent habitation: dishes in the sink, a coffee mug on the counter. In the bedroom closet, officers found a set of men's clothing identical in size and style to the clothing worn by the man in the mail center footage. In the bathroom, a prescription bottle was discovered, a name on the label matching David Brockwell, filled at a pharmacy 40 kilometers away, dated 3 weeks prior. In the kitchen, under the sink, officers found a box containing cigarette packs. 3 packs were missing from a carton of 10. The brand matched the cigarette, but's found in Lisa Ray's guest bedroom. In the garage, technicians found tool marks on a toolbox and a set of screwdrivers with wooden handles. One screwdriver showed a scratch pattern consistent with marks found on the exterior locking mechanism of Lisa Ray's laptop computer. But David Brockwell was not at the residence. His vehicle was not in the garage. His wallet was not in the house. No recent financial activity appeared under his name. His employer reported he had not appeared for work in 9 days. Hartley stood in Lisa Ray's kitchen again, the kettle still sitting on the cold stove. The bank records showed the transfer had been authorized using Lisa Ray's login credentials. Her fingerprints were on the laptop mouse. But the surveillance footage showed David Brockwell opening a bank account under a false name. The woman on the mail center footage remained unidentified. Her face had been partially obscured by the angle of the camera, and her image did not match any records in the facial recognition database. She had signed the forwarding address form with a signature that forensics could not definitively match to Lisa Ray's known handwriting samples. Hartley reviewed the timeline again. The searches for property records and mortgage information, the gap in laptop activity, the cigarettes in the guest room, the tool marks on the laptop, the financial transfers, the cash withdrawal, the forwarding address, the vehicle in the driveway. Every fact pointed toward a crime that had been prepared with care. Every piece of evidence suggested planning that predated Lisa Ray's final night by weeks. But the crime itself remained incomplete in its definition. The kettle sat on the stove, still waiting. Hartley sat in his office with the files spread across the desk, not scattered, but arranged in chronological order. The photographs, the bank statements, the security footage stills, the forensic reports, the property records, the prescription bottle image, the employment records. He had been staring at the same documents for 6 hours. Something was missing. Not physically missing, everything was there, but logically missing. A connection that explained why a woman would authorize wire transfers from her own account to a man who had been in her guest bedroom, smoking cigarettes, using her laptop, measuring her house for what? Theft. Fraud. Both. The real estate searches nagged at him. Property tax records. Mortgage information. But Lisa Ray owned her home outright. The bank records showed no mortgage payments. So why search for mortgage information? Hartley pulled the employment records again. Lisa Ray worked as a real estate appraiser. 12 years with the same firm. Clean record. No disciplinary actions. Her last appraisal had been completed 5 days before she disappeared. He requested the details of that appraisal. The report arrived within the hour. A residential property, a 5-bedroom colonial in an adjacent county. The appraised value, $1.2 million. The appraisal had been requested by a law firm handling an estate settlement. The property was part of a deceased person's assets being divided among heirs. Hartley cross-referenced the property address with the real estate searches from Lisa Ray's laptop. The searches had included this exact property address. Multiple viewings of the public tax record. Multiple searches for the previous sale price, $980,000, 3 years prior. He pulled David Brockwell's background again. The fraud conviction, 7 years prior, had involved asset liquidation. The case file indicated Brockwell had been hired as a property manager for estates and had systematically transferred assets to accounts he controlled before disappearing. He had served 4 years before release. Hartley opened the financial records for Lisa Ray's appraisal firm. He requested the complete client list for the past 2 years. When it arrived, he cross-referenced each client name with David Brockwell's known associates. Nothing matched directly, but then he reviewed the law firm's name, the firm that had requested the appraisal for the estate property. He ran the firm name through the database of businesses associated with previous fraud investigations. The firm appeared once, in a case file from 8 years ago. A lawyer named Patricia Ashford had been investigated for fraudulent property transfers in conjunction with estate settlements. The case had been closed due to insufficient evidence. Ashford was still listed as practicing. Hartley pulled Patricia Ashford's current business information. She worked as an independent consultant now, no longer with a firm. Her address was registered as a commercial office space. He cross-referenced her phone number with the incoming and outgoing calls from David Brockwell's apartment. 7 calls, all within the past 3 months. The last call had been placed from Brockwell's phone on the morning of the day Lisa Ray disappeared. Hartley leaned back in his chair. The structure became visible. Lisa Ray appraises a property at $1.2 million for an estate settlement. The property's previous sale price was $980,000. The appraisal is inflated, not by much, just enough. The law firm handling the estate receives the appraisal and uses it to calculate the estate's value. The heirs receive their distributions based on the inflated appraisal. The inflated appraisal was a smokescreen. It allowed Ashford to siphon $200,000 in liquid assets from the estate's cash accounts, using the increased value of the home to balance the books for the unsuspecting heirs. Patricia Ashford, the lawyer with a history of fraudulent estate settlements, requests the appraisal from Lisa Ray's firm. David Brockwell, a man with a conviction for asset liquidation, coordinates the next step. Access to Lisa Ray's bank account, access to her laptop, access to her home. But the question remained, how had Lisa Ray authorized those wire transfers if she was? Hartley stopped. He pulled the bank login record again. The login at 3:28 p.m. showed account balance only. But the wire transfers had occurred at 2:15 p.m. and 2:47 p.m. Hartley had assumed Lisa Ray had initiated them, but the timestamps created a logical gap. If she had reviewed her account at 3:28 p.m., she would have noticed the missing funds immediately. He requested the complete account activity log, not just the transaction summary. The full detailed record arrived electronically. Hartley scrolled through it line by line. At 1:52 p.m., there was a login from an unfamiliar IP address. The session lasted for 14 minutes. During that session, the wire transfer authorization screen was accessed but not completed. At 2:13 p.m., a second login occurred from the same IP address. This session lasted for 2 minutes. The wire transfer for $30,000 was completed. At 2:44 p.m., a third login from the same IP address. The second wire transfer for $17,000 was initiated and completed. At 3:28 p.m., a login occurred from Lisa Ray's home IP address. This session reviewed account balance only. The unfamiliar IP address was traced. It belonged to a coffee shop approximately 2 kilometers from David Brockwell's residence. Hartley then reviewed the forwarding address form that the unidentified woman had signed at the mail center. He placed it alongside the signature line from the appraisal request form, the document that Lisa Ray's firm had received from the law firm, supposedly signed by Patricia Ashford requesting the appraisal. The signatures were identical. Not similar. Identical. The same pressure points. The same angle on the loop letters. The woman in the mail center footage was Patricia Ashford. The structure crystallized completely. Patricia Ashford, as a lawyer handling estate settlements, had identified properties with appraised values that could be inflated without raising suspicion. She had contacted Lisa Ray's appraisal firm, established, reputable, 12 years of clean work. She had requested the appraisal for the colonial property, knowing that the inflated valuation would increase the estate's recorded value. David Brockwell had accessed Lisa Ray's bank account using credentials obtained from her laptop, credentials he had gathered while in her home, in her guest bedroom, where he had left cigarette butts and tool marks on her computer case. But the motive extended beyond simple fraud. Patricia Ashford and David Brockwell were not random criminals. They were systematic asset liquidators targeting estate settlements. For each fraudulently inflated appraisal, the estate's value increased. For each inflated value, the amount available for redirection increased. The scheme required trustworthy appraisers. Lisa Ray was trustworthy. Her appraisals would be accepted without question, which meant she was a vulnerability. She had to be removed from the equation. Not because she had discovered the fraud, she hadn't, but because future appraisals from her firm would be scrutinized if she disappeared and the scheme unraveled. Her absence, her unexplained disappearance, would actually help them. It would create confusion. Investigation would focus on her, not on the estate settlements bearing her signature. The wire transfers served a second purpose. They provided evidence that Lisa Ray herself had been liquidating assets. When her disappearance was discovered, the authorities would find the missing money and assumed she had fled. Hartley typed the summary into the investigation file. He submitted the request for arrest warrants for both Patricia Ashford and David Brockwell. He documented the IP address traces, the signature analysis, the timeline of logins, the connection between the appraisal and the estate settlement. Then he called the unit commander and requested a meeting. The commander arrived within 20 minutes. Hartley presented the file, the logical chain, the paper trail, the mundane facts that connected to something far larger than a single disappearance. The commander reviewed the documents slowly. When she finished, she looked up at Hartley without expression. "Do we know where they are?" she asked. "Not yet," Hartley said. "But they'll surface. They always do. They need to access another appraisal, another estate, another inflated valuation. That's the only way the scheme continues to work." The commander nodded and reached for her phone. Hartley returned to his office and looked at the photograph of Lisa Ray's kitchen one more time. The kettle on the cold stove, the empty house, the 10 days of silence. The case file would remain open until Lisa Ray was found. But the crime itself was now understood. The perpetrators were identified. The motive was documented. The mechanism was explained through evidence that spoke not in shouts, but in timestamps and signatures and logical sequences. Hartley looked at the photo of the kitchen one last time. The perpetrators were identified, and the mechanism of the fraud was clear. But as he turned off the office light, the stainless steel kettle remained exactly where he found it, cold, dry, and waiting. Second story. At 4:15 p.m., Mark Jensen let himself into the house and dropped his keys on the counter, ready for a quiet evening of grading papers. He failed to see the faint, smudged fingerprint on the edge of the attic's pull-down stairs in the hallway. He missed the fact that his digital thermostat was reading exactly 68 degrees, even though he had powered the unit off before leaving that morning. Mark began to boil water for tea. It was actually the last night he would spend in a home he believed was private. When investigators eventually climbed into the crawl space, they found a small, makeshift living area positioned directly above the master bedroom. Next to a pile of discarded food wrappers was a handwritten log, documenting exactly what time Mark entered and exited every room of his house for the past 3 weeks. Detective Wallace entered through the master bedroom, stepping carefully across the hardwood floor. The attic access was in the hallway, a standard pull-down mechanism mounted in the ceiling. She wore latex gloves and moved with the deliberate slowness of someone who understood that initial observations were invariably the most reliable ones. The smudged fingerprint on the metal frame's edge was visible under the angle of her flashlight. Not fresh. The oils had begun to oxidize, taking on a faint brownish tint. She photographed it at 3 different angles before marking the location with a small evidence flag. The makeshift living space in the crawl space was perhaps 8 feet by 12 feet. Limited headroom, maybe 4.5 feet at the peak. Wallace photographed the entrance, the wooden support beams, the particle board platform that someone had constructed to create a flat surface above the insulation. No nails. The platform was simply placed there, held in position by gravity alone. The food wrappers were scattered across a corner of the platform. Wallace cataloged them methodically. 13 aluminum energy drink cans, various brands, ranging from 3 weeks old to what appeared to be 3 days. 8 plastic bags from a fast food restaurant 2 blocks from the property. 2 empty cereal boxes, 1 plastic water bottle with a label from a gas station on County Road 9. She placed each item in a separate evidence bag, recording its position relative to the others. The handwritten log occupied a composition notebook with a fraying spine. The paper was college-ruled, the handwriting consistent, compact, angular, the work of someone accustomed to writing in confined spaces. Wallace did not open it yet. She photographed every page in place, then began the process of examining what was visible without handling it directly. The entries were dated. The earliest entry was 3 weeks and 1 day prior, a Monday. The notation was precise. *M, in living room 9:34 a.m. Master bedroom 11:07 a.m. Bathroom 11:12 a.m. Kitchen 11:45 a.m. Office 1:19 p.m. Living room 2:55 p.m. to 5:47 p.m. Out. Back at 5:53 p.m. *. Every subsequent entry followed the same format. Times were recorded to the minute. Room transitions were noted immediately upon observation. The handwriting did not deteriorate. The timestamps did not contradict one another across any 2 consecutive days. Wallace observed dust patterns on the support beams, undisturbed except in the area immediately surrounding the platform. Someone had wiped down the wooden beams, erasing handprints or dust marks. The wiping had been done with a cloth or fabric. Lint particles were still visible in the beam's grain where a dry wipe had caught against the wood's texture. She moved to the platform's far corner, where a small pile of items had been arranged with obvious care. A Phillips head screwdriver, a pair of work gloves, leather, well worn, a roll of duct tape, a flashlight, 2 utility knives, a pair of binoculars, a small photograph encased in a Ziploc bag. Wallace photographed each object in place before examining the photograph more closely. It showed a man in his early 40s standing in front of a vehicle. The photograph was old, perhaps 15 years old, judging by the color saturation and the style of the vehicle. On the reverse side, written in the same hand as the log, was a single word, "before." The handwriting in the log had a pattern. Every entry included the notation "out" at various times, always with a return timestamp precisely calculated. Wallace observed that the entries from 12 days prior contained an anomaly. The notation *M, left 6:22 a.m., did not return until 11:31 p.m. That day's log was significantly longer. The writer had documented every room M, visited, every duration, every transition. The final entry for that day was marked with a small asterisk, and at the bottom of the page, a note, *kitchen 11:27 p.m. to 11:39 p.m. Checked mail. Checked locks. Did not enter office. Wallace turned the pages carefully. 8 days prior, another marked day. Bathroom scale reading, 167. Up 2 lbs. The notation appeared to reference the protagonist's weight, logged during a specific bathroom visit documented in the main entries. The composition notebook's back cover contained additional notation, what appeared to be financial figures. Wallace photographed these before removing the notebook entirely. The figures were listed in rows. Electric company, $112.44. Insurance renewal, $387.00. Car payment pending, $456.80. Credit card balance, $2, $847.96. Each figure appeared to correspond with mail that would have been delivered during the observation period. In a corner of the platform, partially concealed beneath the empty cereal boxes, Wallace found a second Ziploc bag. Inside was a set of printed documents. Bank statements, bearing Mark Jensen's name. Credit card bills. A utility bill. A car payment notice. All documents were dated within the past month. All had been photographed. Color photocopies lay beneath the originals. Wallace examined the lighting in the crawl space. A single battery-powered camping lantern hung from a hook screwed into the underside of the attic structure. The hook was relatively new, the metal still bright in comparison to the surrounding fixtures. 2 additional hooks had been installed, but left empty. The platform itself contained the only evidence of permanence. Someone had spent time arranging it, improving it. In the far corner, beneath the support beam, were 3 nails hammered partway into the wood. They formed a horizontal line, spaced exactly 8 inches apart. Nothing hung from them currently. The nail heads showed no oxidation, suggesting they had been driven recently, within the past week. Wallace climbed back down into the master bedroom and stood in silence. From below, standing on the bed, an individual could reach the attic platform relatively easily. The climbing path was vertical, unobstructed. Once inside the crawl space, an observer would have a direct line of sight into the master bedroom through a narrow gap where the insulation did not completely fill the space between the floor joists. She checked the flooring beneath the attic access. The wood showed no scuff marks, no evidence of repeated climbing, but dust had accumulated in a pattern around the base of the access ladder, a circular accumulation consistent with the ladder being raised and lowered over an extended period. In the hallway, Wallace examined the thermostat. The digital display read 68 degrees. The unit was currently powered on. She checked the thermostat's history log, accessible through its small screen. The previous entry, dated to that morning at 7:14 a.m., showed the unit being powered off. The next entry, timed at 3:47 p.m., showed it being powered back on. The thermostat's battery backup contained a full charge. The mail on the kitchen counter had not yet been sorted. Wallace arranged the envelopes in order of receipt, using the postmark dates. Between the dates of 6 days ago and 3 days ago, no mail had been delivered, an anomaly noted by a pink, no mail slip still sitting in the mailbox. She photographed the mail, then examined the kitchen itself. The counters were clear except for a single object, a handwritten note, placed where Mark Jensen would have deposited his keys. The note read, "Asterisk, we know when you leave. We know where you go. We know what you do. You're not alone. Asterisk." The handwriting matched the log. Wallace photographed it in place, then sealed it in evidence. Wallace moved into Jensen's home office on the first floor. The room was small, approximately 10 feet by 12 feet, with a single window overlooking the front driveway. The blinds were closed. A desk occupied the north wall, a filing cabinet the east wall, and shelving the remaining space. She began with the desk surface. A computer monitor sat dark. A wireless keyboard and mouse were positioned precisely parallel to the monitor's base. A desk lamp, a pen holder containing 4 ballpoint pens, all black. A notepad with approximately 30 pages remaining. The top sheet contained a single word written in Jensen's handwriting, "Grades." Wallace photographed the desk before opening the top drawer. Inside were office supplies arranged with deliberate organization. Paper clips in a small container, staples in another, rubber bands grouped by size. In the back of the drawer, separated from the supplies by a divider, lay a checkbook. She removed it carefully. The checkbook's register showed the last entry dated 5 days prior. The amount was $1,240 for car insurance. The entry before that, dated 8 days earlier, was $780 for property tax. The entries spanned back 3 months. Wallace photographed each page before examining the actual checks. The back of the checkbook contained a deposit history. Wallace noted the deposits, 2 monthly deposits of $3,200 each, consistent with a bi-weekly payroll. The most recent deposit was dated 6 days prior. No other deposits appeared in the register. She opened the second drawer. Inside were documents in clear plastic sleeves. Mortgage documents dated 7 years prior. The original purchase agreement for the property, homeowner's insurance paperwork, property tax records. All documents appeared current. Nothing had been removed or altered. The filing cabinet contained 4 drawers. Wallace opened the top one. Inside were manila folders labeled by category: utilities, insurance, medical, auto. Each folder contained statements organized chronologically, the oldest in back, the most recent in front. The medical folder contained 5 years of doctor's visit summaries and prescription records. Wallace noted the dates and types of medications. A blood pressure medication refilled monthly for the past 4 years, an allergy medication refilled seasonally. The records were consistent with a single healthcare provider. In the auto folder were maintenance records for a 2018 sedan registered to Jensen. Oil changes documented at regular intervals. A tire rotation 5 months prior. A battery replacement 3 years ago. No recent repairs. The second filing cabinet drawer contained tax returns dating back 10 years. Wallace examined each return methodically. Jensen's income had remained stable, between $48,000 and $52,000 annually. His deductions were standard: mortgage interest, property taxes, charitable donations ranging from $200 to $600 per year. No anomalies. No unusual income sources. The third drawer contained investment statements from a retirement account. The account had been active for 12 years. The balance had grown steadily, with consistent monthly contributions of $200. No recent withdrawals. The bottom drawer was locked. Wallace examined the lock mechanism. It was a simple push-button lock, common on filing cabinets manufactured in the past 15 years. No signs of forced entry. No scratches around the keyhole. The lock had not been tampered with. She returned to the desk and searched for a key. The pen holder contained only pens. The notepad held only that single word. The desk's remaining drawers yielded nothing relevant. A USB charging cable, several instruction manuals for electronic devices, a flashlight with a dead battery. Wallace moved to the shelving. The upper shelves contained textbooks, reference materials, and what appeared to be professional development books related to education. The middle shelves held personal items. A photograph of Jensen with an older woman, presumably his mother, taken perhaps 8 years prior. A framed certificate marking 15 years of service in education. A small wooden box containing cufflinks and a tie pin. The lower shelves held stacks of student assignments, organized by subject and date. Wallace pulled several stacks and examined them. The assignments were graded, marked with comments in red ink. The handwriting matched Jensen's, the same compact style visible throughout his home. She returned to the filing cabinet's locked drawer and applied pressure to the lock. The mechanism was degraded. The button gave way with minimal force. The lock had been manufactured to prevent accidental opening, not to provide actual security. Inside the drawer were 3 items. The first was a ledger, a small book with lined pages, approximately the size of a checkbook. The cover was unmarked. Wallace opened it carefully. The first entry was dated 1 year prior. Asterisk initial contact. Package arrived as discussed. $800 transferred via wire. Confirmation code 7429 asterisk. The second entry, dated 11 months prior. Asterisk second delivery. Materials received. $1,200 transferred. Confirmation code 8156 asterisk. The entries continued chronologically. 23 entries in total, spanning the past year. Each entry documented a transfer amount and a confirmation code. The transfers ranged from $400 to $2,100. The total amount documented in the ledger exceeded $21,000. The second item in the drawer was a bank statement from a financial institution Wallace did not recognize immediately. The bank's name was printed in small text, a private banking service based in Luxembourg. The statement showed a single account in Jensen's name. The account balance as of the previous month was $18,450. The statement indicated multiple incoming transfers over the past year, corresponding with the dates and amounts in the ledger. No outgoing transfers were documented. The interest accumulated monthly, approximately $12 per transfer. The third item was a business card, printed on heavy stock. The front contained no text, only a logo, a circular design with a stylized letter M in the center. On the reverse side was a single line of text in small print. Inquiries. Contact a verification@sormail.net. Wallace photographed all three items in place before removing them into evidence bags. She closed the filing cabinet drawer and photographed the lock mechanism. The computer on the desk was powered off. Wallace pressed the power button. The system booted slowly, displaying the Windows logo, then requesting a password. She allowed it to complete its startup sequence before disconnecting the power cable. The machine would require technical forensics. She photographed the entire office from multiple angles: the closed blinds, the organized desk, the shelving with its sparse personal items, the filing cabinets. The room had the quality of a space designed to be functional, not comfortable. No family photographs beyond the single image on the shelf. No personal items of significance. No visible evidence of leisure or relaxation. Wallace returned to the locked filing cabinet and examined the bottom drawer's interior. The metal showed no rust or discoloration. The drawer slid smoothly despite the lock mechanism's degradation. Inside the drawer, beneath where the three items had been placed, was a residue, a fine dust pattern visible only when Wallace angled her flashlight at a low angle across the surface. The dust had accumulated in a specific pattern, a rectangular outline, approximately 4 inches by 6 inches, with a concentration heavier in the corners. Something had been stored in that precise location, removed within the past several weeks. The dust pattern suggested the object had been present for months, accumulating debris around its perimeter. Wallace photographed the dust pattern before running her gloved finger across the surface. The dust was fine, consistent with the paper and particulate matter found in typical office environments. No chemical residue, no staining, only the rectangular outline marking where an unknown object had been kept. Wallace moved through the hallway and into the master bedroom. The room was austere, a bed with a navy comforter, a nightstand on each side, a dresser against the far wall. The windows faced the backyard, their blinds drawn completely. The room smelled of nothing in particular. No perfume, no cleaning products, no staleness. The temperature remained constant at 68 degrees. She began with the nightstands. The left side contained a single drawer. Inside were 2 items, a paperback novel with a bookmark halfway through, and a prescription bottle. Wallace examined the bottle. The label bore Jensen's name, the medication name, and a date 3 months prior. The bottle contained approximately 40 pills remaining. The prescription called for 1 pill daily. The right side nightstand drawer held nothing except dust. Wallace moved to the dresser. The top surface contained only a small lamp and a digital alarm clock displaying the current time. She opened the top drawer. Inside were socks organized by color: black, gray, white, folded into neat stacks. The arrangement suggested recent organization: no loose items, no debris. The second drawer contained underwear and undershirts, similarly organized. The third drawer held sweaters. The fourth drawer, at the bottom, contained casual pants. All items were arranged with the same deliberate precision visible throughout the home. Wallace examined the dresser's back surface, where dust typically accumulated. A fine layer was present, consistent with normal household dust. No evidence of disturbance or recent cleaning. She opened the closet. Inside were approximately 15 work shirts hanging on a rod, all white or light blue, arranged by shade. Below them sat 3 pairs of dress pants. On the upper shelf were 2 blazers and a cardigan. A shoe rack on the floor contained 5 pairs of shoes: black leather dress shoes, brown leather casual shoes, running shoes, slippers, and a pair of loafers. Wallace examined each item for tags or receipts. The running shoes bore a size tag, 10.5. The dress shoes showed were consistent with regular use over several years. The blazers had dry cleaning tags dated between 2 and 4 years prior. She returned to the bedroom and examined the bed itself. The comforter was tucked with military precision. The pillows were aligned. She lifted the comforter and examined the sheets beneath. They were white cotton, clean, with no visible stains. She pressed her palm against the mattress, firm, consistent with a medium-quality spring mattress, well-maintained. Below the bed, Wallace found a storage container on wheels. She pulled it out. Inside were additional blankets, neatly folded, and 2 pillows with cases. All items were clean and organized. No debris or lost items in the container's corners. She replaced the container and examined the baseboards around the room's perimeter. No gaps, no evidence of rodent activity or water damage. The paint was uniform and unmarked. The bathroom attached to the master bedroom was accessed through a door on the room's eastern wall. Wallace entered and observed the standard fixtures: a toilet, a sink with a medicine cabinet above it, a shower with a glass enclosure. The tile was beige, the grout clean. She opened the medicine cabinet. Inside were standard toiletries: toothpaste, toothbrush, razor, shaving cream, a small container of antacid tablets, a bottle of over-the-counter pain reliever, the prescription bottle for the blood pressure medication, matching the one in the nightstand, a duplicate, likely kept in the bathroom for convenience. Expiration dates ranged from current to within the next 6 months. The cabinet's shelves showed no unusual items. No prescription bottles beyond those already documented. No medical devices or supplies suggesting any condition beyond the documented blood pressure management. Wallace examined the sink's counter surface. A bar of soap sat in a small dish. A toothbrush holder contained 2 toothbrushes, one with worn bristles, one appearing newer. A small container held a single wedding band, resting on the counter's surface. She picked up the wedding band carefully. The ring was white gold, bearing an engraved date inside: 6.14.2008. The date corresponded to approximately 18 years prior. No matching engagement ring was present. Wallace examined the shower enclosure. The interior was clean, with no soap scum or mineral deposits visible. A single bottle of generic shampoo and a bar of soap sat on the shelf. The drain was clear. No evidence of hair clogs or debris. She returned to the bedroom and examined the area directly beneath the attic access hatch. The carpet showed a worn pattern, a rectangular area approximately 3 feet by 4 feet, with slightly compressed fibers compared to the surrounding carpet. The pattern suggested something had been placed there repeatedly, likely for extended periods, positioned directly beneath the attic opening. Wallace photographed the carpet's worn pattern from multiple angles. She ran her gloved hand across the fibers. The compression was consistent with weight distributed evenly across a flat surface, pressed into the carpet fibers over weeks or months. She examined the wall directly adjacent to the attic access. The paint was uniform except for a small mark approximately 6 feet up the wall, a faint discoloration, roughly circular, approximately 2 inches in diameter. Wallace examined it closely. The mark appeared to be scuff marks from contact with something, repeated contact over time. The paint itself was not damaged, but the surface had been rubbed or pressed repeatedly at that precise location. Wallace moved a stepladder to that location and positioned it directly below the mark. Standing on the second rung, with her eyes at approximately the same level as the mark, she could see that the mark aligned perfectly with what would be a hand position, consistent with someone standing on a stepladder, steadying themselves against the wall while climbing. She photographed the mark in place and from multiple angles. Returning to the bedroom proper, Wallace examined the window blinds. She pulled one slat upward to examine the view. The window faced the backyard directly. The neighbor's house was visible approximately 40 feet away. A fence marked the property boundary. The view provided clear sight lines to the driveway on the opposite side of the house if one angled oneself appropriately. She lowered the blind and examined its structure. The blind was standard aluminum construction, operated by a pull cord. The cord showed were consistent with regular use. No evidence of modification or adjustment. Wallace photographed the entire bedroom again. The bed, the dresser, the open closet, the nightstands, the worn carpet pattern, the mark on the wall. The room was impersonal, functional, devoid of decoration or personal expression beyond the single photograph of Jensen and his mother on the dresser. She returned to the bathroom and examined the wedding band again. The band was clean, showing no discoloration or damage beyond normal wear. The engraved date was sharp and legible. She photographed it in place before placing it in a small evidence bag. The bathroom's exhaust fan was located on the ceiling. Wallace stood on the toilet seat to examine it. The fan cover was dusty but intact. No evidence of tampering. She pressed gently on the cover. It held firmly in place, secured by small clips. No hidden compartments were visible. She climbed down and examined the toilet tank's lid. The ceramic was unmarked and clean. The interior of the tank held standard mechanisms: the fill valve, the flapper, the float arm. All components appeared factory standard and well-maintained. No hidden items or modifications. The shower's temperature control was a standard dual-handle fixture. Wallace turned the handles experimentally. The water pressure was consistent, the temperature responsive to adjustment. No blockages or mechanical issues were evident. She stood in the bathroom doorway and examined the space as a whole. The room was spotless, impersonal, maintained at a level of cleanliness that suggested either obsessive care or the absence of regular use. The dust in the medicine cabinet suggested the latter. Wallace returned to the bedroom and lay on the floor directly beneath the attic access. From that position, looking upward through the open hatch, she could see the edge of the crawlspace platform and the support beams. The angle provided a view of approximately half the platform from the bedroom below. She remained in that position for several minutes, observing the sight line and the proximity of the bedroom's ceiling to the attic structure above. The insulation gap that had provided the observer with a view into the master bedroom was not visible from this angle. The opening was positioned toward the foot of the bed, not the head. Wallace stood and exited the bedroom, closing the door behind her. Wallace moved into the kitchen. The room was small but efficiently organized. Cabinets lined 3 walls. A refrigerator, stove, and dishwasher occupied the 4th wall. A small table with 2 chairs sat near the window overlooking the driveway. She began with the refrigerator. Inside, the contents were minimal and precisely arranged. A carton of milk, dated 6 days prior, with approximately half remaining. 3 eggs in a cardboard container. A block of cheddar cheese in plastic wrap. A jar of peanut butter. A loaf of bread in a plastic bag. The refrigerator's interior was clean, with no spills or debris. The shelves were wiped. The freezer contained 2 items: a box of frozen vegetables and a package of chicken breasts. Both items bore purchase dates from approximately 2 weeks prior. Wallace closed the refrigerator and moved to the cabinets. She opened them systematically, photographing the contents. The upper cabinets held plates, bowls, and glasses, all matching sets, organized by type. No excess dishes. No decorative items. The arrangement suggested a household for 1 person, though the dishes were sufficient for entertaining 4 to 6 guests. The lower cabinets held pots, pans, and cooking utensils. All items showed signs of regular use. A cast iron skillet bore seasoning consistent with years of cooking. A set of stainless steel pans appeared relatively new. Wooden utensils were worn smooth from use. Wallace examined the cabinet beneath the sink. Inside were cleaning supplies, a spray bottle of all-purpose cleaner, a bottle of dish soap, a plastic container of sponges. A trash can was mounted on the interior of the cabinet door. Inside the trash can were 3 items: a paper towel, a plastic bag from a grocery store, and a receipt. Wallace removed the receipt carefully. The paper was damp from contact with discarded liquids, but legible. The receipt was dated 3 days prior, from a grocery store 2 miles from Jensen's residence. The items purchased were listed: milk, $3.47, bread, $2.19, chicken breasts, $8.99, frozen vegetables, $2.50. The total was $17.15, paid with cash. No other items were documented. She photographed the receipt before placing it in an evidence bag. The dishwasher contained no dishes. Wallace opened it fully and examined the interior. The racks were clean. The filter trap contained no debris. A small amount of water remained in the base, consistent with the machine having been run within the past day. Wallace moved to the small table and examined it closely. The surface was clean. She pulled out the chairs. Both chairs showed signs of use. The seat cushions were worn in areas consistent with regular contact. She examined the chair legs and seat backs for any unusual marks or damage. Nothing was evident. She pulled the table away from the wall slightly and examined the space behind it. The floor was clean except for a single item. A small ball of dust accumulated in the corner where the wall met the floor. The dust ball was undisturbed, suggesting the area had not been swept recently. Wallace photographed the dust ball in place before moving to the kitchen door, which led to a basement staircase. The door was painted white, matching the surrounding wall. The doorknob was a standard brass fixture. She opened the door. The basement stairs were wooden, steep, and narrow. The lighting was a single incandescent bulb mounted on the wall at the top of the stairs. Wallace turned on the light and descended carefully, counting the steps. 13 steps brought her to the basement floor. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed support beams, white painted brick walls. The space measured approximately 30 feet by 20 feet. Windows near the ceiling provided natural light during daytime hours. Currently, only the single bulb illuminated the space. Wallace observed the basement methodically. A furnace occupied one corner, its ductwork visible above. A water heater sat adjacent to the furnace. A utility sink was positioned near the water heater, its basin clean and dry. Storage shelves lined the eastern wall. The shelves held standard household items, paint cans, boxes of seasonal decorations, a folded lawn chair, gardening tools. Wallace examined each shelf. The items appeared stable, undisturbed. No evidence of recent rearrangement. The western wall held a workbench with a vise clamped to its surface. Above the bench, a pegboard held various tools: a hammer, a wrench set, a tape measure, a level, a cordless drill. All tools appeared clean and well-maintained. A calendar hung on the wall above the pegboard, dated 7 years prior, long expired, likely left behind from previous owners. Wallace moved to the center of the basement and observed the floor. The concrete bore marks from water seepage, faint discoloration patterns suggesting moisture had entered the space during periods of heavy rain. The marks were old, consistent with years of exposure. She examined the floor more closely for any recent disturbance: footprints in dust, scratches, new concrete patches. The surface appeared uniform and undisturbed. The windows near the ceiling were small horizontal openings, approximately 2 feet wide and 1 foot tall, positioned 4 feet above ground level. Wallace examined them from below. The panes were clean on the exterior. Dust covered the interior panes. She attempted to open one of the windows. It was painted shut, likely sealed for years. She moved to the utility sink and examined it. The basin was porcelain, unmarked. The faucet was brass, showing patina consistent with age. Beneath the sink, pipes connected to the main water line. No evidence of leaks. The area beneath the sink was clean and dry. Wallace examined the furnace. The unit was older, at least 10 years old based on its design. A thermostat control was mounted on the wall nearby, displaying the current temperature setting, 68 degrees, matching the digital thermostat on the main floor. She examined the furnace's filter housing. The filter was clean and relatively new, likely replaced within the past 3 months. No dust accumulation around the unit's base. The surrounding area showed evidence of recent vacuuming or sweeping. Wallace moved back toward the stairs and noticed something on the concrete floor near the bottom step. A faint outline, approximately 4 feet by 8 feet, marked by a slight discoloration in the concrete. The outline was rectangular, similar to the dust pattern visible on the bedroom carpet above. She examined the outline closely. The concrete within the rectangle was slightly lighter in color than the surrounding surface, consistent with an object having been placed on the concrete for an extended period, blocking sunlight and preventing normal weathering. The outline showed no evidence of recent disturbance. The discoloration pattern suggested the object had been in place for months, possibly longer. Wallace photographed the outline from multiple angles, including a wide shot showing its position relative to the furnace and utility sink. She climbed the basement stairs and returned to the kitchen. At the top of the stairs, she examined the door frame. A small hook was mounted on the interior side of the frame, approximately 6 feet up. The hook appeared old, likely original to the house. Nothing hung from it currently. Wallace moved through the kitchen and into the living room, which occupied the front of the house. The room contained a single sofa facing a television mounted on the wall. A coffee table sat before the sofa. 2 end tables flanked the sofa, each with a small lamp. She examined the television. The unit was relatively new, approximately 3 years old based on the model number visible on the back. A cable box and streaming device were connected below it. Wallace turned on the television. It powered up immediately, displaying the menu for a streaming service. The device showed no recently watched content. The watch history had been cleared. She examined the cable box. A small light blinked, indicating the device was powered on and receiving signal. The box was warm to the touch, suggesting it had been active. Wallace checked the cable company's account information visible on a small label affixed to the unit. The account number was registered to Mark Jensen. The coffee table contained two items, a remote control and a paperback book, matching the one in the bedroom nightstand but appearing to be a different title. Wallace examined the book. The back cover indicated it was a mystery novel, published 7 years prior. The pages showed significant wear, with creases suggesting the book had been read and reread multiple times. She opened the book. The inside cover contained an inscription written in handwriting that did not match Jensen's. Asterisk to Mark, for your birthday. Hope this keeps you company during the long nights. Love, Mom, asterisk. The inscription was dated 18 years prior. Wallace photographed the inscription before replacing the book. She examined the remotes on the coffee table and end tables. 3 remotes were present, one for the television, one for the cable box, one for the streaming device. All appeared functional. She sat on the sofa and observed the view of the television from that position. The angle was direct, unobstructed. The viewing distance from the sofa to the screen was approximately 8 feet. From that position, the television screen filled the field of vision almost completely. Wallace stood and examined the television's mount. The bracket was standard, securely fastened to the wall. No damage or unusual wear was evident. The cables connecting the devices were neatly organized, routed behind the television and down along the back of the entertainment stand. She moved to the window near the sofa and examined the blinds. These blinds, unlike those in the bedroom, appeared to be used regularly. The slats showed fingerprints and dust accumulation consistent with frequent adjustment. Wallace pulled one slat upward and examined the exterior view. The window faced the front driveway and street beyond. A clear view of approaching vehicles was available from this position. Wallace noted the time on her watch, 4:47 p.m. The light outside was beginning to diminish as the afternoon progressed toward evening. She photographed the living room from multiple positions, capturing the sofa, the television, the coffee table, and the window view. She exited the living room and entered a second hallway, leading to what appeared to be the home's remaining spaces. A coat closet was positioned near the front door. Wallace opened it. Inside hung 3 coats, a winter parka, a rain jacket, and a light cardigan. Below them sat a pair of boots and a pair of sneakers. A shelf above held a baseball cap and a winter hat. All items appeared well-maintained and in regular rotation. The closet smelled faintly of cedar, suggesting a moth prevention product had been used. Wallace closed the closet and approached the front door. The door was solid wood, painted white, with a deadbolt and a standard lock mechanism in the handle. Through the peephole, she could see the front porch and driveway beyond. She examined the deadbolt. No evidence of forced entry was visible. The lock appeared functional and undamaged. The door frame showed no signs of prying or impact. Wallace turned from the door and examined the hallway wall. Near the door, a small shelf held a collection of items, a set of keys on a ring, a small bowl of loose change, a notepad and pen, and an envelope containing what appeared to be bills. She examined the keys. The ring held 4 keys, one marked for the house, one marked for a car, and 2 unmarked keys of different sizes. Wallace photographed each key before examining the envelope. The envelope contained 3 documents, an electric bill, a water bill, and an insurance statement. All were dated within the past week. All had been opened, read, and replaced in the envelope in their original order. Wallace photographed the documents in place before placing the envelope back on the shelf. She examined the notepad. The top page contained a single line of writing: "Call insurance company, Wednesday." The note was dated 14 days prior. Wallace moved through the kitchen and into the attached garage. The space was two-car capacity but contained only a single vehicle, a 2018 sedan, silver in color, matching the registration visible in Jensen's filing cabinet. The garage itself was organized with the same precision evident throughout the home. The walls held pegboards with tools mounted and labeled. Paint cans were stacked in a corner, their contents identified by tape on the lids. Shelving held automotive supplies: oil, filters, coolant, windshield washer fluid. A workbench occupied one wall, its surface clean and empty except for a small vise. Wallace examined the vehicle first. The exterior showed normal were consistent with 8 years of regular use. The paint was clean. The tires appeared properly inflated. She attempted to open the driver's side door. It was locked. She returned to the house and retrieved the car keys from the shelf near the front door. The key marked "Car" unlocked the vehicle. Wallace opened the driver's side door and examined the interior. The seats were clean, covered in a fabric that showed minor were consistent with regular use. The steering wheel was unmarked. The dashboard displayed standard gauges and controls. Wallace examined the odometer. The vehicle had approximately 74,000 miles. She opened the glove compartment. Inside were the standard documents: the vehicle's registration, proof of insurance, the owner's manual, and a small flashlight. The registration was current. The insurance policy was active through the end of the current month. No other items were present. Wallace closed the glove compartment and examined the vehicle's interior more thoroughly. The floor mats were clean. Under the front seats, she found nothing except a single coin, a quarter, embedded slightly in the carpet. She left it in place and photographed it. The back seat appeared unused. No items were present. The seat fabric showed no signs of wear or use. Wallace opened the rear door and examined the back of the front seats. The upholstery showed no marks or damage. The seat backs appeared pristine. She closed the rear door and examined the vehicle's trunk. Inside, she found a spare tire, a jack, and a small emergency kit containing jumper cables, a flashlight, and a first aid kit. All items appeared factory standard. The trunk's carpet was clean. No other items were stored. Wallace closed the trunk and examined the vehicle's exterior more carefully. She walked around the perimeter, documenting the condition of each panel. No dents, no scratches, no damage beyond normal wear. The license plate was current, matching the registration. She returned to the garage and examined the remaining space. A pegboard wall displayed various tools: hammers, screwdrivers, wrenches, a power drill, a circular saw. All tools appeared clean and well-maintained. A tool belt hung on a hook, its pockets containing measuring tape and nails. The workbench held a vise, as noted, and a small drawer. Wallace opened the drawer. Inside were various fasteners, screws, nails, bolts, washers. All items were organized in small compartments. A tube of caulk and a small container of wood stain occupied the remaining space. She examined the concrete floor of the garage. The surface showed typical staining from oil and water exposure. An oil stain approximately 3 feet in diameter occupied the space beneath the vehicle, consistent with minor leaks from normal vehicle operation. The stain showed age. Its edges were not sharp, suggesting it had been present for months or longer. Wallace examined the garage door. The mechanism was electric, with a remote control mounted on the wall near the entry to the house. She pressed the button. The door opened smoothly, revealing the driveway and street beyond. She pressed the button again. The door closed with equal smoothness. She examined the door's tracks and rollers. All components appeared to function properly. No evidence of damage or obstruction was visible. Wallace moved to the far wall of the garage, where additional shelving held automotive supplies. She examined each shelf systematically. Motor oil in various viscosities, air filters, engine and cabin, transmission fluid, brake fluid, windshield washer concentrate. All items appeared to be in regular use, with some bottles more than half empty. Behind the shelving, she noticed something, a small space between the shelf unit and the wall. She pulled the shelving unit forward carefully. The space behind contained nothing except dust and a single item, a receipt, partially deteriorated, lying on the concrete floor. Wallace retrieved the receipt carefully. The paper was fragile and damaged, but portions of the text were legible. The receipt was dated approximately 8 months prior, from an electronics retailer. The visible text indicated a purchase of approximately $340. The item purchased could not be determined from the remaining legible text. She photographed the receipt in place before removing it to an evidence bag. Wallace examined the area behind the shelf unit. The concrete showed a clean rectangular outline, similar to the patterns observed in the bedroom and basement. The outline measured approximately 2 feet by 3 feet. The concrete within the outline was noticeably lighter than the surrounding surface, consistent with an object having blocked natural light exposure for an extended period. The object that had created this outline appeared to have been removed recently. The light coloration pattern still showed sharp edges, suggesting less than a month had passed since the object's removal. Wallace photographed the outline before pushing the shelf unit back into its original position. The shelving unit fit precisely into the space, with no gaps visible. She examined the wall behind where the shelf unit had been positioned. The painted concrete showed no marks or damage. A single nail was driven into the wall at approximately head height, approximately 18 inches from the corner. Nothing hung from the nail. Wallace returned to the main garage area and examined the remaining space. A washer and dryer were positioned in one corner, their hookups visible on the wall behind them. The machines appeared and used. No lint accumulation on the top surfaces, no evidence of recent operation. She opened the washer. The drum was empty and clean. She opened the dryer. The drum was also empty. The lint trap appeared clean, with only a minimal accumulation of lint, consistent with a thorough cleaning at some point in the past week. Wallace examined the machine's control panels. Both were simple, mechanical models without electronic displays. No indication was visible of recent use. She moved to the shelving unit again and examined it from a different angle. The arrangement of items on the shelves showed evidence of thoughtful organization. However, one shelf in the middle section displayed a gap, a space approximately 2 feet wide where items would have naturally sat, but where the shelf now contained only empty space. The gap corresponded to where items similar in size to the outline pattern visible on the garage floor would have been positioned. The adjacent items on the shelf were pushed tightly together, their positioning suggesting they had been moved inward to fill a space that had once held something else. Wallace photographed this gap from multiple angles before examining the shelf surface itself. Dust accumulation covered most of the shelf, but the gap area showed a clean rectangular outline, the dust pattern indicating where items had previously blocked light exposure. She examined the items adjacent to the gap. a container of motor oil, a box of air filters, a spray can of lubricant. All items appeared to have been moved from their original positions, compressed together to minimize the visible gap. Wallace stepped back and examined the entire garage again, photographing it from the entry point and from multiple angles within the space. The garage was organized and clean, yet contained evidence of recent removal and rearrangement of items. The patterns visible on the floor, on the shelves, and on the wall suggested that something significant had been stored, maintained, and recently removed from this space. She returned to the vehicle and opened the driver's side door again. She examined the steering wheel, the dashboard, and the interior mirrors. No visible evidence of surveillance equipment or monitoring devices was apparent. The vehicle appeared to be a standard personal automobile with no modifications. She closed the door and locked the vehicle, returning the keys to their position near the front door. Wallace stood in the garage for several minutes, observing the space as a whole, noting the organized tools, the clean surfaces, the subtle evidence of recent disturbance beneath layers of routine maintenance and careful arrangement. The time was now 5:15 p.m. Daylight was diminishing rapidly outside. Wallace photographed the garage one final time before exiting the structure and closing the door behind her. Wallace sat in her unmarked sedan parked outside Jensen's home, the engine off, the interior cooling as the sun descended below the horizon. She held the Luxembourg bank statement in one hand and the composition notebook in the other. The pages of handwritten observations lay spread across the dashboard and passenger seat, a topography of evidence accumulated over the past 8 hours. The financial ledger documented 23 transactions, 23 payments made to an account registered in Jensen's name at a private banking institution in Europe. The amounts varied, the confirmation codes matched, the timeline was consistent. Over 1 year, approximately $21,000 had entered that account. Over 1 year, nothing had left it. The digital thermostat had been powered off at 7:14 a.m. on the day Jensen left for work. It had been powered back on at 3:47 p.m. while Jensen was still absent from the home. Only the person in the attic crawl space could have accessed that thermostat during those hours. Only that person had the knowledge that the thermostat existed, that it could be manipulated, that its settings could be documented. The handwritten log was meticulous. 21 days of observation. Every room, every timestamp, every transition. The observer had documented Jensen's movements with precision, had timed his absences, had learned his patterns. The log indicated specific behavioral notes, the bathroom scale reading, the observation that Jensen had checked the mail, the notation that Jensen had not entered his office. The observer had monitored Jensen's home systematically, not randomly, with purpose. Wallace examined the business card again, the circular logo with the stylized M, the email address, contact.verification@scrmail.net. The card contained no other identifying information, no company name, no phone number, no physical address. She pulled out her phone and opened the photographs she had taken earlier. The dust pattern on the garage floor, the rectangular outline, light and clean-edged, suggesting recent removal. The gap on the shelf where items had been rearranged. The deteriorated receipt from the electronics retailer dated 8 months prior, amount approximately $340. Electronics, surveillance equipment, a camera, perhaps, or multiple cameras. Equipment stored in the garage, arranged on shelves, maintained carefully, removed recently. Wallace thought about the gap on the shelf, the space where items had been compressed together to fill the void. The shelf had held whatever had been documented in that degraded receipt. Equipment, recording devices, monitoring apparatus. She examined the composition notebook again, flipping to the page with the financial notation. Electric company, $112.44. Insurance renewal, $387.00. Car payment pending, $456.80. Credit card balance, $2, 847.96. The observer had documented Jensen's financial obligations, had accessed his mail, had photographed his bank statements and credit card bills, had copied his personal documents, the copies visible in the Ziploc bag found on the platform. The observer knew Jensen's financial situation. The observer had photographed Jensen's documents to verify amounts, dates, and account numbers. Wallace's hand moved to the bank statement from Luxembourg again. The account balance, $18,450. The deposits, multiple transfers, each corresponding with an entry in the financial ledger. The confirmation codes matched perfectly. Someone was paying Jensen money, regular payments, into an offshore account, money that was supposed to remain hidden, segregated, untraceable. Wallace considered the motivation. Extortion required leverage. It required knowledge of something Jensen wanted hidden. Something worth $21,000 over 12 months. Something worth maintaining surveillance, documented carefully, recorded systematically. She pulled out the photograph found on the crawlspace platform. The man in front of a vehicle, 15 years old. The handwritten word on the back, before. Before what? Wallace opened her laptop and accessed the vehicle registration database. She entered the make and model visible in the photograph, a 1998 sedan based on the styling. She searched for registrations associated with Jensen's name. The search returned no results for that vehicle. Jensen's current vehicle was the 2018 sedan in his garage. No record of vehicle ownership from 15 years prior existed under his name. She searched property records. Jensen had owned the current residence for 7 years, having purchased it with a mortgage. Before that, no residential ownership appeared in the county records. She searched employment records. Jensen had been employed at the local school district for 15 years. The certificate visible on his office shelf confirmed this. His employment history before that was not documented in the readily accessible system. Wallace set the photograph aside and returned to the business card. The logo, the circular design with the M. She conducted an online search for that logo in combination with surveillance and monitoring terms. No results matched. She searched the email address, contact.verification@scurmail.net. The domain appeared to be a private, encrypted mail service with no public business registration or contact information. Wallace closed her laptop and sat in silence. The evidence was substantial but incomplete. The observer had documented Jensen's daily activities with precision. The observer had accessed Jensen's financial records. The observer had maintained surveillance equipment, stored recently and recently removed. The observer had payments flowing into an offshore account registered to Jensen's name. But the connection between Jensen and the observer remained unclear. The handwriting on the note left on the kitchen counter matched the handwriting in the composition notebook. But that did not identify the writer. The fingerprint on the attic stairs had not yet been processed. The DNA from the food wrappers had not yet been analyzed. What connected the observer to the payments? What connected the observer to Jensen? Wallace's eyes moved to the insurance statement visible on the kitchen counter photograph. The document had been opened and read. The observer had noted it. The insurance renewal was dated to occur on a specific date. The amount was $387. Wallace pulled up the photograph of Jensen's office desk. The notepad with the single word, grades. The the pen holder, the computer monitor, the precise arrangement. She reviewed the photograph of the locked filing cabinet, the bottom drawer, the ledger, the bank statement, the business card. She returned to the composition notebook and examined the entries for 8 days prior. The notation was marked with an asterisk. The bathroom scale reading, 167 pounds. The observation that Jensen had checked the mail. The observation that Jensen had not entered the office. But there was another notation that day. Wallace traced her finger across the page slowly, reading each entry. Asterisk M, left 6:22 a.m. Did not return until 11:31 p.m. Checked mail. Checked locks. Did not enter office. Asterisk. The final entry. Asterisk bathroom scale reading, 167. Up 2 lbs. Asterisk. 8 days prior, Jensen had been absent for 17 hours. The observer had noted that Jensen did not enter the office. The observer had documented this specifically, with underlining and emphasis. Why did it matter that Jensen had not entered his office? Wallace opened the photograph of the locked filing cabinet again, the bottom drawer, the ledger, the bank statement from Luxembourg, the business card. She thought about the deteriorated receipt from the electronics retailer. 8 months prior, $340. Equipment removed from the garage recently. She thought about the gap on the shelf where items had been compressed together. She thought about the outline on the garage floor, light and clean-edged, suggesting recent removal. She thought about surveillance equipment being stored, maintained, and recently removed from Jensen's own garage. Wallace's mind made the connection suddenly, with the force of a statement rather than a question. Jensen was not the target. Jensen was not the victim. Jensen was the perpetrator. The surveillance equipment had been stored in Jensen's garage. The financial ledger had documented payments made to Jensen's account. The offshore bank statement showed money flowing into Jensen's name. The observer in the attic had been documenting the surveillance Jensen himself was conducting. But the observer was not documenting Jensen's innocent activities. The observer was documenting Jensen's criminal operation. Someone had been surveilling the surveiller. Wallace pulled the composition notebook to her again and reread the entries with this understanding in place. The observer was not interested in where Jensen went or what rooms he occupied. The observer was documenting what Jensen was accessing, who Jensen was communicating with through his computer, what financial documents were being handled. The observer had noted that Jensen checked his mail. The observer had noted that Jensen did not enter his office during the marked day, the day when Jensen was absent for 17 hours. The observer was tracking Jensen's access to financial information and communication devices. Wallace reviewed the entries once more. The bathroom scale reading had been documented. The notation, up 2 pounds, carried significance beyond simple observation. The observer was documenting Jensen's psychological state, the stress eating, the behavioral changes indicating awareness of a problem. The note left on the kitchen counter was not a threat. It was an announcement, a declaration that the observation was known, that the surveillance was itself under surveillance, that the operation was compromised. Asterisk, we know when you leave. We know where you go. We know what you do. You're not alone. Asterisk. The message was directed at Jensen, but not to intimidate him about his daily activities. The message was telling Jensen that his criminal operation was known, that his surveillance of another subject or multiple subjects was itself being monitored, that his financial crimes were documented. The observer in the attic had been law enforcement, federal agents, possibly, conducting counter-surveillance of a subject engaged in systematic financial exploitation. But that did not explain everything. The composition notebook was not official documentation. The surveillance in the crawl space was crude, amateur. The method contradicted professional protocol. Wallace reconsidered. The observer was not law enforcement. The observer was a victim. Someone Jensen had been surveilling. Someone Jensen had blackmailed. Someone who had become aware of the operation and had reversed it, had climbed into Jensen's attic to document the documenter, to gather evidence against the man who was gathering evidence against them. Wallace examined the wedding band found in the bathroom again. The engraved date, June 14, 2008, 18 years prior. A marriage that had apparently ended. The band was removed from Jensen's finger, placed on the bathroom counter. She searched the public records for marriage certificates associated with Jensen's name. The search returned one result, a marriage certificate dated June 14, 2008, registered in the county. The spouse listed was an individual named Robert Hartfield. Wallace conducted a background search on Hartfield. The individual had resided in the county until 9 years prior, when the records indicated a relocation out of state. Current residence and employment information was not immediately accessible through standard channels. She searched for any criminal filings associated with Hartfield's name. No results appeared. She returned to the composition notebook and examined the financial entries again. Credit card balance, $2, $847.96. The notation was specific. The amount was precise. This was not an estimate. This was a documented fact, photographed from Jensen's financial documents. Wallace considered the timeline. Jensen had been surveilled for 21 documented days. The financial ledger in the locked filing cabinet documented 23 payments over 12 months. The surveillance in the attic had been recent. The note left on the counter had forced the operation into the open. Someone had entered Jensen's attic, had documented his surveillance operation, had cataloged his financial crimes, and had announced their presence. That someone was likely Hartfield, or someone acting on Hartfield's behalf. Wallace pulled up the photographs of the deteriorated receipt from the garage again. 8 months prior. Electronics retailer. Approximately $340. Equipment purchased and stored. She conducted a search for Hartfield in the state where he had relocated. The search revealed employment records. Hartfield was employed as a private investigator. Licensed. Current. Based in a city 3 hours from Jensen's residence. Wallace's understanding crystallized completely. Hartfield had become aware of Jensen's surveillance operation. Hartfield had hired himself out as a private investigator, had conducted his own investigation into Jensen's activities, and had documented the surveillance operation methodically. The equipment stored in the garage, surveillance equipment that Jensen himself had purchased, had become the focus of counter-surveillance. The financial ledger documented payment from someone to Jensen. The payments flowing into the offshore account were not blackmail payments. They were evidence of a financial crime Jensen was documenting for purposes of extortion. Jensen was extorting someone. The payments in the offshore account were the fruits of that extortion. 23 payments over 12 months, totaling $21,000. Approximately $1,750 per month on average. Someone was paying Jensen $1,750 monthly to maintain silence about something documented in financial records, something photographed, something Jensen had threatened to expose. That someone had hired Hartfield to investigate. Hartfield had turned the investigation around, had documented Jensen's operation, and had announced his presence with the note left on the counter. The case was not complete. The identity of the person being extorted remained unknown. The specific nature of the financial crime Jensen was documenting remained unclear. The exact mechanism of the extortion threat had not been recovered. But the central fact was now undeniable. Mark Jensen was a criminal engaged in systematic extortion, using surveillance and financial documentation as leverage against an unidentified victim. Someone, likely Hartfield, possibly others, had discovered this operation and had conducted counter-surveillance to document the crime. Wallace sat in her sedan as night fell completely around her. She pulled out her phone and began documenting her conclusions. She would contact the state investigator's office. She would request access to Hartfield's investigation files. She would obtain warrants to access the offshore account and trace its funding source. The case would be resolved through paperwork and digital forensics, through bank records and financial tracing, through patient accumulation of evidence leading to inevitable conclusion. She photographed the notebook one final time, capturing the financial ledger entries with maximum clarity. Then she started the engine and drove toward the police station, where she would file the report that would set the machinery of prosecution in motion. Third story. At 11:45 p.m., the perimeter lights at the Oak Ridge construction site flickered once and then went dark, leaving the stacks of premium cedar and structural steel in total shadow. The foreman, Greg Vance, didn't notice that the digital timestamp on the main gate's security log had been manually overwritten to show a system maintenance status. He didn't notice the low hum of a flatbed truck idling 3 blocks away with its headlights off. Greg turned the key in his truck and drove home. It was actually the last night the site would be fully stocked. When the project manager arrived on Monday morning, the site was still locked and the guard was in his booth as usual. But 4 tons of lumber were gone, and the security footage for the previous 6 hours was a perfect, unbroken loop of an empty gate. Detective Marcus Keene arrived at 8:33 a.m. before the coffee in the project manager's office had cooled. The manager, Richard Paulson, stood near the gate with his arms crossed, the morning light casting sharp shadows across the gravel lot. For tons, Paulson said, 2x6s, 2x8s, premium grade. Structural steel beams, too, worth roughly $38,000. Keene walked the perimeter first. The fence was intact. No bolt cutters, no climb marks on the posts. He noted the gate's hinges, standard commercial grade, well maintained. The lock showed no scratches around the cylinder. The security booth sat adjacent to the main entrance. The guard on duty Monday morning was named Patterson, a man in his early 60s with the posture of someone who'd held the same job for years. Keene found him sitting inside, a thermos of coffee at his elbow, the radio tuned low. "Did you leave the booth at any point Saturday night?" Keene asked. "No, sir. I'm here the full shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. You were here at 11:45? I was. Checked the rounds at 11:30. Gate was locked. Lights were on then." Keene examined the security log, a leather-bound ledger with entries handwritten in blue ink. The entries for Friday and Sunday were uniform. Temperatures recorded, gate checks at regular intervals, patrol times noted. Saturday's page told a different story. Between 11:40 p.m. and 5:15 a.m., there were no entries at all. The preceding line, dated 11:35 p.m., read perimeter secure, lights functioning. The next entry, at 5:18 a.m., showed all clear. "Did you write these entries?" Keene asked, pointing to Saturday's section. Patterson leaned forward, squinting. His face changed. "No, that's not my handwriting. Look at the capital G in perimeter. I write those differently. And that's not how I sign off." He pointed to the space where his initials should have appeared. The Saturday entry contained no signature at all. Keene photographed the page. The ink appeared consistent with the pen in Patterson's shirt pocket, but the pressure and slant differed markedly from the surrounding entries. Whoever had written this page had attempted to match the style, but had not studied Patterson's signature long enough. The gate's electronic lock contained a small keypad. Keene examined it under the morning light. The numbers 3 and 7 were noticeably more worn than the others. The plastic showed a slight gloss loss, the kind that developed over repeated contact. The code, apparently, contained those digits, and contained them more than once. "What's your gate code?" Keene asked Patterson. 7734. Keene checked the maintenance logs. The facility manager, a man named Robert Cho, maintained a separate record of access codes and system resets. The log showed that the gate's code had been changed on Saturday at 2:47 p.m. The entry read, "System maintenance. Code reset to factory default temporarily. Reset complete." The entry was unsigned. Cho was in his office by 9:15 a.m. He showed Keene the work order. "I didn't authorize that," Cho said immediately. "My signature's not on that." The work order was printed on official facility forms, but the authorization signature was missing. The date and time were correct, but Cho's computer records showed no corresponding maintenance ticket generated that afternoon. His system automatically logged all gate modifications. The Saturday log at 2:47 p.m. was blank. Keene walked the storage area. The lumber had been stacked in 3 distinct piles, 2x6s on the west side, 2x8s in the center, steel beams on the east. The ground where the wood had been stored showed indentations where the weight had pressed into the gravel. The impressions were deep, roughly parallel, suggesting heavy load distribution. A flatbed truck would create marks like these. Behind where the lumber had been stored, Keene found a single piece of evidence, a metal shim, roughly 3 inches by 1 inch, made of mild steel with factory edges. There was no reason for it to be on this site. The construction hadn't yet reached the phase where shims would be needed. It lay in the dust, catching the morning light. He bagged it. The gate's security camera had been disabled. Paulson showed him the DVR unit in a small shed near the booth. The system displayed a loop, 10 hours of footage from Saturday, repeated perfectly, with the timestamp frozen at 10:17 p.m. The loop showed an empty gate, a closed gate, and nothing else. The unit's internal clock had been reset. The DVR itself contained signs of tampering. The access panel showed fresh scratches around the screws. Someone had opened it recently. The power cable had been disconnected and reconnected. The connector bore a thin layer of dust inside the jack, suggesting it had been dislodged for several hours. Keene checked the backup system. Paulson had mentioned a secondary camera mounted on the north wall of the main building. When they reached it, the lens was smeared with a heavy grease, the kind used on construction equipment. The residue was fresh, leaving a faint sheen in the morning light. Keene could smell it, a petroleum product, possibly chain lubricant. He photographed the smeared lens, photographed the indentations in the gravel, photographed the handwritten log entry, the shim, the disabled DVR, the smeared camera lens, and the gate's worn keypad. By 10:45 a.m., the site had yielded 7 distinct pieces of evidence, none of them conclusive, all of them pointing in the same direction. Someone had spent time studying this location. Someone had obtained access codes or had forced them. Someone had known the security system's vulnerabilities. Someone had walked this gravel lot in the darkness and had done the math. The supply delivery records occupied 3 filing cabinets in Paulson's office. Keene pulled the Saturday invoices first. 2 deliveries had occurred that day. Lumber arrived at 9:15 a.m., steel beams at 1:33 p.m. Both were checked in by Patterson, his initials appearing in the receipt column. The signature line contained his actual signature. the same one that was notably absent from the security log. Keene photographed both receipts. The third cabinet held vendor contacts. The lumber had been supplied by Hartwell Building Materials, based 40 miles north. The steel came from Kelton Industrial Supply, 15 miles south. Keene called Hartwell first. Saturday delivery? The voice on the phone belonged to a dispatcher named Iris Malone. Let me check our records. The line held for 2 minutes. We delivered to Oak Ridge at 9:15 a.m. on Saturday. Driver was one of our regulars, Danny Kelso. He confirmed the delivery and got a signature from your guard. Did the driver note anything unusual? Hold on. Another pause. Danny wrote, normal delivery, no issues on the run sheet. 14 pallets, all accounted for. Keene asked for Kelso's contact information and called next. The driver answered on the third ring. Saturday, Kelso said, yeah, I was there. Early morning run. Got there before the site was fully staffed. Just Patterson in the booth. He signed me off. I unloaded, I left. Did you see anyone else on the property? No. It was quiet. The project manager wasn't there yet. Paulson usually arrives around 10. I was gone by 9:40. Keene thanked him and moved to Kelton Industrial Supply. The steel delivery was handled by a different dispatcher, a man named Frank Whitmore. Our driver was Robert Garrison. Delivered at 1:33 p.m. on Saturday. Standard commercial delivery, fully received and signed for. Keene obtained Garrison's number. The driver picked up on the second ring. Saturday at Oak Ridge, yeah. I was there with 8 beams, roughly 2 tons. Backed the truck right up to the gate. Paulson was there that time, the project manager. He watched me unload. This was a discrepancy. Paulson had not mentioned being on-site Saturday afternoon. He made a note. Back at the site, Keene found Paulson in the main office reviewing damage assessments for the insurance claim. You were here Saturday afternoon? Paulson looked up. For the steel delivery, yes. Robert Garrison brought it in around 1:30. I was here maybe an hour, oversaw the delivery, then left. Did you notice anything unusual? No. Everything was normal. The steel was stacked properly. Garrison checked off the inventory against the bill of lading. All standard. Keene asked to see the bill of lading. Paulson retrieved it from a folder. The document showed 8 structural steel beams, grade 50, various lengths. Garrison's signature appeared at the bottom, dated and timed at 1:33 p.m. Paulson's initials were in the received by column. But there was another notation at the bottom of the document, in smaller handwriting. Note: 2 additional beams delivered separately, not invoiced, per project manager verbal authorization. Keene pointed to it. Paulson's face went still. He read the lines slowly. I didn't authorize any additional beams, he said, and I don't recognize that handwriting. Keene photographed the bill of lading and called Garrison back. The bill of lading shows a note about 2 additional beams delivered separately. Do you remember that? A pause. No. I delivered what was on the invoice. 8 beams. That's what I unloaded. I don't know anything about additional beams or any verbal authorization. Keene hung up and examined the notation more carefully. The ink color matched the rest of the document, but the pen pressure was different, lighter, hesitant. Someone had written the note after the fact, possibly days later. He returned to the storage area. The indentations from the lumber piles were still visible. He photographed them from multiple angles, then walked the perimeter of where the steel had been stacked. The earth there showed deeper impressions. The weight of the beams had compressed the gravel. He counted the spacing. The impressions suggested 10 distinct load points, not 8. In the area where the eastern pile had been, Keene found a receipt wedged beneath a piece of discarded rebar. It was partially weathered, the paper beginning to curl at the edges. He bagged it carefully. The receipt was from a fuel station 9 miles from the site, dated Saturday at 11:22 p.m. The purchase was 42 liters of diesel fuel, paid in cash. No credit card record, no name attached. The pump number was 3. Keene contacted the fuel station. The manager, a woman named Patricia Stokes, pulled up the surveillance footage from Saturday night. The recording showed a flatbed truck, bed covered with a tarp, pulling up to pump 3 at 11:22 p.m. The driver remained in the cab. An exterior light illuminated the truck's cab partially, but the driver's face was obscured by the angle and the darkness. The truck's registration plate was visible on the footage, but partially obscured by mud. Patricia could make out most of it. A commercial registration from the state. The first 3 characters clear, 7KR. The remaining numbers muddied and indecipherable. Keene requested the raw video file. Patricia provided it on a USB drive within 30 minutes. Back at the Oak Ridge site, Keene reviewed the footage frame by frame on Paulson's computer. The truck's profile suggested a standard commercial flatbed, possibly a rental. The body color appeared dark, black or dark blue, difficult to determine in the low light. At 11:27 p.m., the truck pulled away from the pump. Keene then reviewed the timeline. The work order for the gate code reset appeared at 2:47 p.m. on Saturday. The steel delivery was at 1:33 p.m. The fuel purchase was at 11:22 p.m. The lights at the Oak Ridge site went dark at 11:45 p.m. Everything converged in a 4-hour window between afternoon and midnight. The shim Keene had found near the steel pile remained bagged in his evidence case. He examined it again under the office light. The steel was unmarked, unremarkable, but one edge bore a faint impression, the ghost of a stamping or embossing that had been worn nearly smooth. Keene could make out partial lettering, KTI, and below it what might have been a date or serial number. He photographed it and sent the image to the state police lab with a request for metallurgical analysis and any traceable manufacturing marks. By 2:15 p.m., Keene had accumulated 10 distinct pieces of evidence. The case had moved from a simple inventory theft into something more complex, a theft that required inside knowledge, technical access, and advanced planning. Someone had studied this site. Someone had obtained or forged documentation. Someone had added beams to an invoice that never left the property, or had used the delivery as cover for additional material that arrived separately. And somewhere on a dark road 9 miles away, a truck registered as 7KR. Something had filled a tank and driven toward the Oak Ridge site at precisely the moment the perimeter went dark. Keene began cross-referencing commercial truck registrations with the partial plate. The state police database returned 43 commercial truck registrations beginning with 7KR. Keene printed the list and divided them by rental company, owner-operator, and construction firm. 28 were rental vehicles from 5 major companies. The rental agencies maintained GPS tracking on their fleet. Keene started with Premier Rentals, the largest provider in the region. He spoke to their fleet manager, a man named Douglas Price, who confirmed they had 6 vehicles with plates beginning in 7KR. "I need records for Saturday," Keene said. Specifically, rentals that were active between 2 p.m. and 2 a.m. Sunday morning. Price placed him on hold, then returned 7 minutes later. "We have 2 vehicles that fit that window. A box truck, 7KR 491, rented by a company called Meridian Logistics, and a flatbed, 7KR 338, rented to a private individual." "The flatbed," Keene said. "I need the renter's information." The name on the rental agreement was Thomas Ashford. The address listed was a residential property in the city, 43 miles from Oak Ridge. The driver's license matched. The payment was made in cash, $300 for 24 hours. The renter had declined the optional insurance. "Did Mr. Ashford have a rental history with you?" Keene asked. "Let me check." Price typed. "No. First-time rental." He called, asked about flatbed availability, came in around 1:50 p.m. on Saturday, signed the paperwork, and drove off. Keene obtained the address and contacted the local precinct. Officers were dispatched to the Ashford residence by 3:22 p.m. The house was a modest single-story structure with a detached garage. No one answered the door. The officers reported the house appeared unoccupied. No vehicles in the driveway, curtains drawn, no lights visible. A warrant was issued. Officers entered at 4:05 p.m. and found the interior sparse and recently vacated. Dust patterns on surfaces indicated that furniture had been removed within the past few days. The garage contained a workbench, tool racks, and oil stains on the concrete floor suggesting heavy machinery had been stored there. On the workbench, officers found a receipt from an industrial supply company dated 3 weeks prior. The receipt was for electrical conduit, breaker boxes, and industrial lighting components, the kind used in temporary site power systems. The total was $817, paid in cash. Keene drove to the residence himself. The kitchen contained minimal items, a single coffee cup in the sink, a bottle of aspirin on the counter, a microwave with the timer still displaying 2:15 from when it had last been used. Keene photographed all three. The garage's workbench held more detailed evidence. A laminated blueprint was taped to the wall, showing the layout of an industrial construction site. Keene photographed it and recognized the design immediately. It matched the Oak Ridge site's layout. The blueprint bore hand-drawn annotations, circles around the security booth, the main gate, and the 2 camera locations. An arrow had been drawn pointing to a spot 15 meters north of the gate, labeled Primary Load Point. Below the annotations, someone had written calculations in blue pen. Keene photographed those as well. The math appeared to involve truck weight distribution and load capacity. Next to one equation, someone had written 8 beams equals 4 tons. Check capacity. The oil stains on the floor suggested heavy equipment had been positioned in a specific location. Keene measured the floor space, roughly 12 meters by 8 meters, with the heaviest concentration of stains concentrated in the center. A work light hung overhead, angled downward. On a shelf above the workbench, officers found a folder containing printed documents. Inside were payroll records, insurance forms, and employee files for Hartwell Building Materials, the lumber supplier. One file bore the name Robert Garrison, the same driver who had delivered the steel beams on Saturday. The file contained his address, phone number, and what appeared to be fabricated employment records showing him employed at Hartwell for the past 4 years. But when Keene called Hartwell again and asked specifically about their employee list, the dispatcher, Iris Malone, confirmed that Garrison was indeed a driver, but his tenure was listed as 6 months, not 4 years. Keene requested all employees' hire dates and backgrounds for Hartwell. The list showed Garrison hired 6 months ago, his previous employment listed as independent contractor, long haul. No prior employer contact information was provided. Keene then pulled Garrison's commercial driver's license from state records. The license was valid, issued 4 years ago. The photo matched the man who had answered Keene's phone call. The address listed was a commercial mail drop, not a residence. Back at the Ashford house, officers had begun photographing each room. The bedroom contained a single mattress on the floor, no sheets. A nightstand held 3 items: a phone charger with no phone, a bottle of water, and a paperback book, a technical manual titled Industrial Security Systems and Their Vulnerabilities. The book's spine showed heavy wear, the pages dog-eared and annotated in margins. Keene photographed several passages, each highlighted in yellow, sections covering electronic gate locks, DVR backup systems, camera feed loops, and electrical system redundancies. In the second bedroom, officers found filing cabinets. The drawers contained financial records, bank statements, invoices, and what appeared to be a ledger tracking expenses. The ledger began 3 months ago and listed line items: site reconnaissance, $200, tools, $450, gate lock analysis, $100, fuel and vehicle, $750, electrical supply procurement, $817, and several others, culminating in flatbed rental, $300. The total expenditure listed at the bottom of the ledger was $5,200. Keene photographed every page of the ledger. A notebook was found wedged behind one of the filing cabinets. The handwriting matched the annotations on the blueprints. The notebook contained dated entries spanning 12 weeks. Week 1, identified site. Security appears standard. Gate lock model 5500. Check vulnerability databases. Week 3, obtained security system specifications. DVR model allows loop access if internal power is cycled. Visited site 3 times. Confirmed delivery schedule. Lumber arrives Saturdays. Week 5, purchased equipment. Awaiting delivery. Garrison contacted. Willing to participate for percentage. Week 7, test run planned for Saturday. Garrison will deliver additional beams with standard shipment. Gate code will be reset and documented as maintenance. Power cycle for DVR at 11:40 p.m. Load time approximately 45 minutes. Week 8, Saturday, everything went as planned. Trucks loaded at midnight. Left site at 12:47 a.m. No complications. Garrison performed his role perfectly. Next phase begins Monday. Keene photographed each page of the notebook. The final entry, dated the following Monday, simply read, material transferred. Waiting for buyer contact. Officers ran the name Thomas Ashford through the system. No criminal record, no prior arrests, no outstanding warrants. His driver's license listed his age as 34, occupation listed as construction consultant. Keene ran a background check. Ashford had worked for 3 different construction management firms over the past 8 years. His employment record showed he was terminated from the most recent position 4 months ago, approximately the same time the planning for the Oak Ridge theft appeared to have begun. The termination reason was listed as performance concerns. A search warrant was issued for financial records. Bank statements revealed that Ashford had received a deposit of $12,000 on Monday morning, the day after the theft, into an account that had been dormant for 6 weeks prior. The money had come from a wire transfer, routed through an offshore account. The originating information was minimal. The transfer was labeled consulting payment, with no client name listed. By 5:40 p.m., Keene had established a clear chain of evidence connecting Ashford to the planning, Garrison to the execution, and the stolen material to a buyer whose identity remained unknown. The coordination was precise, the planning methodical, the execution timed to exploit specific vulnerabilities in the site's security. What remained unclear was where the material had gone after midnight on Saturday, and who had paid $12,000 for 4 tons of lumber and structural steel that was worth substantially more. Keene requested records from the Port Authority, examining all trucks that had exited the county between midnight and 6 a.m. on Sunday morning. The Port Authority's records showed 18 trucks exiting between midnight and 6 a.m. on Sunday. Keene obtained the commercial manifests for each. Most were routine: food distribution, medical supplies, construction materials bound for legitimate projects with documented permits and purchase orders. One truck stood out: a flatbed registered to a company called Brennan Construction Supply had exited at 1:18 a.m., carrying what the manifest listed as reclaimed lumber and structural materials. Destination: Industrial Salvage Facility, Westbrook County. The truck was driven by a man named Victor Oakes. The manifest was signed by the facility's receiving dock supervisor, a name Keene did not recognize. Keene called Brennan Construction Supply. The company operated from a commercial park on the eastern side of the city. The manager who answered was suspicious of questions about their truck movements. "That manifest is routine," the manager said, a man named Derek Stinnett. "We acquire reclaimed materials regularly. That's our business model." "Who arranged the pickup at Oak Ridge?" A pause. "I'd have to check our records. Can you call back?" Keene didn't wait. He drove to the facility. The yard occupied roughly 2 acres, stacked with lumber, steel beams, drywall, and reclaimed architectural elements. The office was a small metal structure adjacent to the main gate. Keene entered and found Derek Stinnett at a desk covered with invoices and delivery receipts. "I need to see the paperwork for the Sunday morning pickup," Keene said, showing his badge. Stinnett's expression tightened. He pulled a folder from a filing cabinet. "The pickup was arranged by phone Saturday afternoon," Stinnett said. "A woman called, asked if we had capacity to receive reclaimed material Sunday morning. She said the material was coming from an estate liquidation, that it needed to be moved quickly." "Did you get her name?" "She didn't provide one. Just said the driver would have all the documentation." Keene examined the paperwork. The manifest was printed on standard forms. The destination listed as Brennan Construction Supply, salvage processing. The quantity listed was approximately 4 tons, mixed materials, with an estimated value of $600 marked as salvage acquisition. The driver on record was Victor Oakes. Keene requested Oakes's employment file. Stinnett hesitated, then retrieved it. Oakes had been employed for 9 months. His previous employment was listed as independent contractor, freight. No references were provided. The address on file was the same commercial mail drop that Robert Garrison had used. Keene photographed the file and the manifest. Did Oakes usually accept calls arranging pickups? Keene asked. "No," Stinnett said. "That was unusual. Normally, I handle all incoming requests. But Saturday afternoon, when the woman called, she specifically asked if we had a driver available that night. I told her yes, Oakes was available. She seemed to already know about him." "What did her voice sound like?" "Professional. Older, maybe. Hard to say over the phone. She spoke clearly, didn't ask many questions. When I quoted her $600 for the salvage value, she agreed immediately." Keene requested the phone records for the facility. The call had come from a block number at 3:17 p.m. on Saturday. No callback information was available. The salvage yard itself contained roughly 40 tons of reclaimed material in various stages of processing. Keene walked the perimeter, observing the stacks. New material was often segregated from older stock. He identified a recent addition: 4 tons of premium cedar and structural steel, identical in specification to what had been stolen from Oak Ridge. The material was stacked in the northeast corner, separated from older reclaimed stock. Victor Oakes was not at the facility. Stinnett provided an address: another residential mail drop, identical format to Garrison's and Ashford's. Keene had officers check the location. The address was registered to multiple individuals and received mail for approximately 15 different businesses. A pattern was forming. Keene requested a comprehensive search of all 3 addresses associated with Ashford, Garrison, and Oaks. The searches revealed no direct connections, no shared apartments, no joint bank accounts, no phone records linking them together. But the timing of their mail drop registrations was nearly identical, all occurring within a 6-week window. Keene then examined the salvage yard's financial records. Brennan Construction Supply had received a payment of $600 from the facility's account on Sunday morning. But 3 days later, that same $600 had been transferred to a secondary account, one registered to a company called Meridian Properties. Meridian Properties operated from a commercial office building downtown. Keene obtained the company registration. The listed owner was a woman named Catherine Whitfield, age 57. The company had been in operation for 18 months. Its stated business was commercial real estate consulting and property acquisition. Keene requested Catherine Whitfield's background. She had no criminal record, no prior arrests. Her employment history showed work in commercial real estate for the past 20 years, primarily in project management and site acquisition. 5 years ago, she had worked for the same construction management firm that had employed Thomas Ashford. Her current driver's license address was an upscale residential neighborhood, 30 miles from the city. Keene requested surveillance on the address and began cross-referencing bank statements for Meridian Properties. The company's financial activity was minimal. The $600 deposit on Sunday was the most significant transaction in recent months. Outgoing expenses were few: office rent, utilities, phone service. But one item appeared regularly in the ledger: payments to a company called Nordic Import Consulting, located in a country with minimal financial reporting requirements. Each payment was labeled consulting fee with no itemization. The amounts varied between $500 and $2,000, occurring roughly twice monthly. Over the 18 months of the company's operation, Nordic Import Consulting had received approximately $38,000. Keene traced Nordic Import Consulting. The company existed only as a registered entity with minimal public information. The address listed was a commercial mail drop in a port city known for lenient business registration practices. No physical office, no phone number, no employee records. The trail went cold there. But the flow of money was clear. Stolen material arrived at the salvage yard, was valued at $600, and that payment was immediately transferred to a shell company that funneled the money overseas. The actual market value of the stolen material was roughly $38,000. If the pattern held, if similar thefts had occurred previously, the Nordic Import Consulting account might represent the accumulated proceeds of multiple coordinated thefts. Keene requested records from other regional construction sites with similar security profiles. He found 3 thefts over the past 7 months. A site in the county seat where $12,000 worth of copper wiring disappeared, a residential project where 50 tons of specialty concrete was taken, and a commercial development where premium framing lumber vanished. All 3 thefts occurred on weekends. All 3 involved documented delivery vehicles and inside coordination. All 3 were reported as inventory shortages rather than thefts. Keene interviewed the project managers at each site. The patterns matched: personnel who claimed no knowledge of additional deliveries, security logs with gaps or inconsistencies, surveillance footage that looped or malfunctioned during the critical hours. He then obtained bank records for each of the 3 sites' corresponding salvage facilities. In every case, small payments, between $400 and $1,200, had been transferred to Meridian Properties within days of the theft. Catherine Whitfield's file expanded. Keene requested phone records for Meridian Properties. Between Saturday afternoon when the Oak Ridge theft was being organized and Sunday morning when the material arrived at the salvage yard, Catherine Whitfield had made 3 phone calls. 2 were to block numbers. One was to a cellular phone registered to a company called Transit Logistics. Keene traced Transit Logistics. The company operated a fleet of commercial trucks, primarily specializing in long-haul freight and salvage material transport. The owner was a man named Richard Blackwell, age 62. He had no criminal record, but had filed for bankruptcy twice in the past 15 years. His company had survived through minimal margins and seasonal work. A recent inspection of Blackwell's facility by the State Commerce Department had flagged concerns about vehicle maintenance and operator licensing. 3 of his trucks were found to have falsified inspection records. The violations had not yet resulted in formal charges, but the investigation was ongoing. Keene requested the cellular records for Transit Logistics. The phone received calls regularly from Meridian Properties, approximately 2 calls per month. Each call lasted between 3 and 8 minutes. The calls had been occurring for the past 15 months, since shortly after Meridian Properties was registered. By 7:15 p.m., Keene had identified a structured operation. Ashford and Garrison coordinated site-specific thefts. Oaks and others transported material to salvage yards. Stinnett at Brennan Construction Supply provided legitimacy to the acquisition. Catherine Whitfield processed the payments through Meridian Properties, converting stolen material into untraceable cash. Richard Blackwell's Transit Logistics provided cover transportation. The stolen goods were valued at $38,000. But the payments funneled through Nordic Import Consulting suggested the actual proceeds were substantially higher, meaning either previous thefts had occurred or the material was being resold at a significant markup after being processed through the salvage yard. Keene requested warrants for Catherine Whitfield's residence and Meridian Properties office. He also requested access to Transit Logistics vehicle GPS records for the past 7 months. What remained unknown was where the material ultimately went after leaving the salvage yard, and who was purchasing it on the other end of the Nordic Import Consulting pipeline. The chain extended beyond the county, possibly beyond the state. And somewhere in that extended chain was a buyer with capital and connections sufficient to absorb $38,000 in materials at a $600 discount. The warrants were issued at 9:22 p.m. Officers entered Catherine Whitfield's residence at 6:15 a.m. on Tuesday morning. The house was a 2-story structure in a gated community, well-maintained, with a 3-car garage. The interior was professionally decorated, but showed minimal signs of occupancy. The kitchen contained no groceries, only bottled water and coffee supplies. The master bedroom held a queen bed with fresh linens, a closed closet, and a nightstand with a single item, a leather portfolio containing financial documents. Keene arrived as officers were photographing the interior. He examined the portfolio. Inside were bank statements for 3 accounts, all held under Catherine Whitfield's name, but with different institutions. The statements showed regular deposits from Meridian Properties and regular withdrawals, typically small amounts, $500 to $2,000 at a time, transferred to various suppliers, office furniture companies, website hosting services, utility providers. But one withdrawal pattern stood out. Every 2 weeks, a cash withdrawal of exactly $5,000 appeared on the statements, with no corresponding expense recorded in any of the visible ledgers or receipts. Over 15 months, those withdrawals totaled $150,000. Keene photographed the statements. The garage contained two vehicles, a 5-year-old sedan and a late-model luxury SUV. The sedan showed minimal use. The odometer reading was 8,400 miles, roughly consistent with local driving only. The SUV showed significantly higher mileage, 34,200 miles, averaging more than 2,000 miles per month. Keene checked the maintenance records in the glove compartment. The vehicle had been serviced 3 times, with each service note indicating heavy highway mileage and coastal road salt accumulation. The salt suggested regular travel to coastal areas. Keene photographed the service records. The office of Meridian Properties was located on the 7th floor of a downtown building. The space consisted of a single room, roughly 15 meters by 10 meters, containing a desk, filing cabinets, and a small conference table. No employees were present. Catherine Whitfield was not at the location. Officers conducted a thorough search. The filing cabinets contained business licenses, tax returns, and correspondence with various suppliers. But no files related to salvage yard acquisitions, construction material purchases, or the coordination of site thefts. The desk contained only office supplies and a computer terminal, which was powered down. The computer was seized and delivered to the State Police Forensic Lab. Keene examined the trash bin. It contained discarded papers, printed emails, routing confirmations, and what appeared to be handwritten notes. One note, partially legible, read, "VO confirmed Sunday pickup. Material transferred to salvage by 2:15 a.m. Payment to MP processed Monday." The handwriting did not match Catherine Whitfield's signature on her business documents. Keene photographed the note. The forensic analysis of the computer began immediately. The technician, a specialist named Angela Reeves, reported preliminary findings within 6 hours. The system had been wiped, but remnants of deleted files remained in the hard drive's unallocated space. Among the recovered data were email drafts, many unsent, containing detailed instructions for coordinating thefts at specific construction sites. One draft, dated 8 months ago, read, "Target, Henderson Avenue Residential Project. Security profile, single booth, gate lock model 5500, DVR model 3100. Recommend Ashford for site reconnaissance. Timeline, 3 weeks for planning, 1 week for execution. Estimated recovery, 8 to 12,000. Another draft, dated 6 months ago, listed multiple sites with identical formats. Site address, security vulnerabilities, estimated material value, recommended personnel for site coordination and execution, and projected timeline. The drafts referenced individuals by initials, VF, likely Ashford, VO, Victor Oakes, RO, Robert Garrison, using a different last name or alias, and others Keene did not yet have identities for. One draft contained financial projections. The writer had calculated that each successful theft generated a profit margin of approximately 1,400 to 1,600%. Material stolen at market value but fenced through the salvage yard at a fraction of its true worth. The stolen material was then resold, presumably through Nordic Import Consulting, at a markup. The document contained a notation. Scale up to 6 to 8 sites per quarter. Annual revenue target, $450K to $600K. Overhead, $80K. Net, $370K to $520K. Reeves confirmed the computer had been used to communicate via encrypted email with an external account registered to Meridian North, an account based on the same offshore server as Nordic Import Consulting. Transit Logistics GPS records provided geographic data for every vehicle in the fleet over the past 7 months. Keene cross-referenced the movements with the dates of known thefts. 3 trucks showed a consistent pattern: departure from a construction site during theft windows, arrival at salvage yards within hours, then movement toward the coast, specifically to a port city 140 miles away. The port city was known for its maritime cargo operations and minimal customs inspection procedures. King contacted the port authority there. Records indicated that multiple shipping containers had been processed through the facility bearing shipments to international destinations, specifically to countries in Central America and South America known for unregulated construction and development operations. One container, manifested as reclaimed building materials, had been loaded on a cargo vessel bound for a port in Guatemala on February 18th, 18 days after the Oak Ridge theft. The container's documented weight was 4,200 kilograms, consistent with the stolen material. The shipping manifest listed the consignee as Nordic Import Consulting, with a receiving address in Guatemala City. Keene requested copies of the shipping documentation. The manifest had been signed by an employee of the Port Authority, a man named Stanley Brewster. Keene interviewed Brewster by phone. The port employee confirmed the shipment, but claimed he had simply processed the paperwork as presented. The documentation looked standard, Brewster said. Container came in on a truck. I verified the weight, checked the manifest, and scheduled it for loading. It was routine. Did you verify the contents? That's customs' job, not mine. My department just handles the logistics and scheduling. Keene obtained the customs inspection report for that container. The document showed the box had been x-rayed and visually inspected. The inspection report noted reclaimed lumber and structural materials consistent with manifest description. No contraband detected. Cleared for export. The customs inspector who had signed off was a woman named Helena Corrigan. Keene requested her work history. Corrigan had been employed at the port for 3 years, with a salary of $62,000 annually. But bank records showed she had made a deposit of $8,000 in cash on February 18th, the same day the Guatemala-bound container was processed. The deposit had no corresponding income documentation. When Keene requested an interview, Corrigan's attorney immediately asserted her right to remain silent. The chain had extended into federal jurisdiction. Keene contacted the FBI's field office. An agent named David Foster took the case and began coordinating with international law enforcement in Guatemala. The receiving address in Guatemala City was a warehouse in an industrial zone. Preliminary investigation by Guatemalan authorities indicated the facility was registered to a shell company, with no identifiable owner listed in public records. But surveillance conducted by local police observed multiple construction vehicles arriving at the facility to collect materials. Among those vehicles were trucks bearing the logos of 2 major construction firms currently engaged in large-scale development projects in Guatemala, a hotel complex and a residential high-rise. Both projects were known to be operating with minimal permitting oversight and labor safety regulations. Foster's investigation revealed that the material stolen from the Oak Ridge site and other regional thefts was being directly integrated into these Guatemalan projects, reducing construction costs and allowing the developers to substantially underbid competitors. The markup Catherine Whitfield's organization was achieving through Nordic Import Consulting was approximately 300%. Material purchased at salvage prices was resold to the Guatemalan developers at legitimate market rates, generating substantial profit for the theft ring while simultaneously subsidizing construction costs for projects that would never have been profitable at standard pricing. Keene reviewed the broader picture. The operation employed at least 7 known coordinators: Ashford for site planning, Garrison and Oakes for execution, Stinnett for legitimacy, Whitfield for payment processing, Blackwell for transportation, and Corrigan for customs clearance. The operation generated between $370,000 and $520,000 annually. And the final destination was not an unknown criminal operation, but rather legitimate construction projects in a foreign country with minimal regulatory oversight. The stolen material was being laundered through commerce, transformed into buildings, absorbed into the infrastructure of another nation. By Wednesday evening, Catherine Whitfield had not been located. Her residence remained under surveillance. Her bank accounts were frozen. Her vehicles were impounded. But she had disappeared, likely aware that the investigation had reached critical mass. Keene continued examining the Meridian Properties office. In a filing cabinet drawer, beneath a false bottom, officers discovered a notebook. The handwriting inside did not match Catherine Whitfield's. The entries were dated, beginning 18 months ago, with notes about site selection, personnel recruitment, and financial projections. One entry, dated 6 months ago, read, "CW has connections to international buyers. Margin calculations confirm viability. Full implementation timeline. 18 months to establish network, 12 months to scale operations. Expansion to southwestern region approved." Another entry, more recent, noted, "EF arrested for unrelated offense, minor. Recommend temporary suspension of Oak Ridge site operations. Resume in 4 weeks pending his status." But a final entry, dated 3 days before the Oak Ridge theft, contained a single line. "Everything proceeds as planned. The offshore accounts are secure. The buyers are ready." The handwriting in this final entry was different, rushed, executed by someone under stress. Keene had it photographed and sent to a handwriting analyst for comparison against known samples. By Thursday morning, the forensic lab had completed preliminary analysis of the Meridian Properties computer. Reeves reported discovering fragments of deleted files containing contact lists. Among the contacts were several phone numbers with international area codes and email addresses associated with construction companies in Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. One email thread, partially recovered, consisted of 4 exchanges spanning 2 months. The sender's address was listed only as MN, Meridian North, but the content indicated the sender was coordinating material specifications with a construction firm in Honduras. The exchange discussed quantities, material grades, delivery schedules, and pricing. The final email in the thread contained a single line: "Confirm receipt of 4-ton shipment from secondary procurement source. Material quality acceptable. Next shipment schedule TBD based on project requirements." Keene had no evidence identifying who operated the MN email account, but the sophistication of the communication, the knowledge of international construction markets, and the access to offshore financial infrastructure suggested someone with substantial business experience and international connections. The operation extended beyond the theft ring's visible members. Someone above Catherine Whitfield, someone whose identity remained concealed, was orchestrating the demand and coordinating the supply chain. Keene requested Foster's assistance in interviewing the construction firms in Central America. Foster arranged calls to the Honduras Development Company, but the operators refused to provide any information without legal representation. The company's attorney, based in Miami, stated that his clients had no knowledge of the material's origins and had assumed all shipments came from legitimate commercial sources. The investigation had reached its practical limit. The theft ring's operational structure was clear. The coordination between site coordinators, logistics personnel, and customs officials was documented. The flow of stolen materials into international commerce was established, but the identity of whoever stood above Catherine Whitfield, directing the operation's expansion and managing the international buyer relationships, remained obscured. Keene sat in his office Thursday afternoon, reviewing the evidence files. Somewhere between the frozen bank accounts, the seized computers, the impounded vehicles, and the documented thefts was the answer to who was directing the operation. But the evidence, meticulous as it was, did not yet reveal that name. Keene sat in the evidence room on Friday morning, spreading the materials across a steel table. The case had fractured into fragments, each piece documented, photographed, cross-referenced, but the central figure remained elusive. Catherine Whitfield's disappearance suggested she was either a fall guy or genuinely peripheral to the operation's strategic direction. The notebook found in Meridian Properties' filing cabinet kept drawing Keene's attention. The handwriting shifted throughout its entries. The early months showed one writer's script, methodical, precise, consistent pressure on the pen. The middle months showed a different hand, looser, more hurried. The final entries reverted to the first writer, but with variations suggesting stress or unfamiliar writing conditions. Keene requested a full handwriting analysis comparing all samples from the notebook against known exemplars from the investigation. Catherine Whitfield's signature, Thomas Ashford's rental agreement, Robert Garrison's delivery confirmations, Derek Stennett's office memos. The analyst, a specialist named Dorothy Price, delivered her report by noon. The earliest entries in the notebook matched Catherine Whitfield's handwriting with high probability. The middle entries were inconclusive. The writing style suggested someone trained in a different region or era, but no match could be established. The final entries contained characteristics consistent with Whitfield's script, but the analysis was uncertain. Price noted one additional observation. The middle entries, despite being in a different hand, contained corrections and annotations that appeared to be in Whitfield's handwriting. Someone had reviewed the notebook, edited it, and returned it to the filing cabinet. Keene then pulled the employment files from Brennan Construction Supply. Derek Stennett had worked there for 7 years. His hiring paperwork was complete, references checked, background clean. But Keene noticed something in the file. Stennett's resume listed previous employment at 3 construction firms over a 15-year period. The third previous employer was Whitfield Construction Management, a firm Keene had identified earlier as Catherine Whitfield's prior workplace. Stennett had worked there as a project coordinator. The employment dates showed he had worked under Whitfield's direct supervision for 2 years, from 8 years ago to 6 years ago. Keene pulled Whitfield Construction Management's public records. The firm had dissolved 6 years ago. The dissolution filing cited insufficient market demand and owner decision to pursue alternative business opportunities. Catherine Whitfield had been the sole owner. The timing aligned with when Meridian Properties was registered, 18 months ago, but Keene now observed that Catherine Whitfield's employment at the original construction management firm had ended exactly 6 years prior. That 6-year gap between the closure of her original firm and the establishment of Meridian Properties suggested either legitimate career transition or planned dissolution and restructuring. Keene reviewed the bankruptcy filings for Richard Blackwell, owner of Transit Logistics. The first bankruptcy, filed 11 years ago, showed that Blackwell had been a partner in a construction logistics company. His partner in that business was listed as Catherine Whitfield. The partnership had been dissolved when the company failed due to market contraction and insufficient capital. Keene sat back. The connections were emerging. Whitfield and Blackwell had worked together before. Whitfield and Stinnett had worked together. The question was whether those relationships explained the operation's current structure or whether they simply indicated how Whitfield had recruited her coordinators. But there remained the fundamental question: who was MN? The person operating the Meridian North email account, coordinating with international buyers, and directing the expansion of the theft operation? Keene requested detailed financial records for Catherine Whitfield's personal accounts going back 5 years. The documents arrived from her bank on Saturday morning. He began cross-referencing income sources with known employment and business operations. Catherine Whitfield's salary from legitimate construction consulting work explained approximately $180,000 over the past 5 years. But her account activity showed substantially higher deposits during that same period. The additional funds, averaging $80,000 to $100,000 annually, came from wire transfers originating from Meridian Properties. Meridian Properties' own bank records showed incoming revenue from only 3 sources: the small payments from salvage yards, averaging $600 to $1,200 monthly, occasional consulting contracts billed to construction firms, averaging $5,000 to $15,000 quarterly, and regular large deposits from Nordic Import Consulting, averaging $35,000 to $50,000 quarterly. The math was straightforward. Nordic Import Consulting was paying Meridian Properties substantially more than the salvage yard markup would generate. The difference, the actual profit on resold materials, was being funneled back to Nordic Import Consulting's Central American buyers. But who controlled Nordic Import Consulting? The company's registration documents listed no owner, only a registered agent address in a jurisdiction that did not require beneficial ownership disclosure. Keene then examined the seized computer from Meridian Properties more carefully. Reeves had recovered the deleted email drafts and contact lists, but the computer's user account logs might reveal additional information. The system showed login records dating back 6 months. Each login was time-stamped, and the user account was listed as Meridian_admin. Keene requested a forensic trace of the IP addresses associated with each login. The majority of logins came from a static IP address registered to Meridian Properties office, but approximately 15% of the logins came from a different IP address, one registered to a residential address in a suburb 40 miles north. That address belonged to Derek Stinnett. Keene sat motionless for several minutes, allowing the implication to settle. Derek Stinnett, Brennan Construction Supplies manager, had been logging into Meridian Properties' computer remotely. He had access to the email accounts, the financial records, the coordination documents. But the handwriting analysis had shown that the notebook's entries, the strategic planning documents, did not match Stinnett's writing. The central figure directing the operation remained obscured. Keene then reviewed the personnel files one more time, focusing on the dates. Derek Stinnett had been hired at Brennan Construction Supply 7 years ago. Catherine Whitfield's original construction management firm had closed 6 years ago. Richard Blackwell's first bankruptcy had occurred 11 years ago. Thomas Ashford had been terminated from his last employment 4 months ago. And then Keene noticed something in Ashford's employment termination letter. The letter was from a construction management firm called Whitfield Stinnett Development. The company had been registered with the State Commerce Department 3 years ago. 3 years, not 6 years, when Meridian Properties was registered. 3 years. Keene obtained the corporate filing for Whitfield Stinnett Development. The certificate of formation listed two owners, Catherine Whitfield and Derek Stennett, equal partners, each holding 50% equity. The company had operated for approximately 2 years before Ashford's termination. The filing included a dissolution notice dated 14 months ago, indicating the partnership had been dissolved by mutual consent. The dissolution was signed by both Whitfield and Stennett. Keene cross-referenced the dates. Whitfield Stennett Development had dissolved 14 months ago. Meridian Properties records showed that Thomas Ashford had been hired for site reconnaissance work 13 months ago. The dissolution of Whitfield Stennett Development had preceded the Oak Ridge theft operations initiation by exactly 1 month. Keene then pulled the bank records for Whitfield Stennett Development. The account showed typical business activity for a construction consulting firm: client payments, supplier invoices, payroll deposits. But in the final 6 months before dissolution, the account had been systematically emptied through wire transfers to Nordic Import Consulting. The total transferred, $120,000. The timing was precise. Whitfield Stennett Development had been the vehicle through which Whitfield and Stennett had initially established contact with Nordic Import Consulting. When that relationship was mature, when the infrastructure for international material distribution was established, they had dissolved the company and restructured operations under Meridian Properties, presumably to create separation between the consulting work and the theft coordination. But the fundamental insight was still incomplete. Keene knew how the operation functioned, but not who truly directed it. He returned to the notebook. The early entries, the strategic planning that established the operations framework, were in Catherine Whitfield's handwriting. But those early entries contained annotations and corrections in a different hand. And the final entries, the ones reflecting on the operation's status and expansion, reverted to Whitfield's script but showed signs of stress. What if the annotations, the corrections to Whitfield's strategic planning, represented someone else's input? What if that someone else had gradually assumed control of the operation, and the notebook reflected that shift in authority? Keene requested the forensic team to conduct a secondary analysis of the notebook, specifically isolating the annotation passages and comparing them against additional handwriting samples from each suspect. The request was processed Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, Dorothy Price had completed the analysis. She delivered it in person. The annotations, Price said, are in Derek Stennett's handwriting. I compared them against memos from Brennan Construction Supply. The match is high probability across multiple samples. Keene felt the structure crystallize. Derek Stennett, not Catherine Whitfield, had been directing the operation. Whitfield had established the initial framework, had contacts with Stennett and others, but Stennett had seized operational control. The notebook's shift from Whitfield's script to his annotations reflected the operational transition. But the question remained, why would Derek Stennett, a salvage yard manager earning $55,000 annually, risk orchestrating a theft operation generating $400,000 to $500,000 annually? Keene pulled Stennett's financial records. The salvage yard manager's personal accounts showed modest income consistent with his employment, but also showed substantial monthly withdrawals in cash, typically $3,000 to $5,000, with no documented expenses. Those withdrawals had begun exactly 18 months ago, when Meridian Properties was registered. Keene then examined Derek Stennett's employment history more carefully. The Brennan Construction Supply hiring documentation included a note from the hiring manager, reference checks completed with Whitfield Stennett Development, verified employment and performance, no issues noted. Whitfield Stennett Development had been the company through which Stinnett had previously worked. When that company dissolved, Stinnett had needed employment. Brennan Construction Supply had hired him, likely through Catherine Whitfield's recommendation, placing him in a position where he could direct reclaimed materials into the operations network. But the positioning suggested planning. Whoever had established Whitfield Stinnett Development had done so with the intention of creating a skilled coordinator who could later be placed in a salvage operation. Keene reviewed the original incorporation documents for Whitfield Stinnett Development. The filing showed that Catherine Whitfield had proposed the business structure, and Derek Stinnett had joined as an equal partner. But the timing of Stinnett's entry into the partnership corresponded with a gap in his employment history, a 3-month period where his resume showed no work. During those 3 months, 14 years ago, Stinnett had worked for Whitfield Construction Management, the original firm that had later dissolved. He had worked there for 2 years, from 8 to 6 years ago, under Whitfield's supervision. So the relationship between Whitfield and Stinnett was not recent. It extended back more than a decade, and Whitfield had maintained contact with Stinnett through the dissolution of her original firm, through his period of unemployment, and into his positioning at Brennan Construction Supply. The planning predated the theft operation itself. Whitfield had cultivated Stinnett over years, building trust, establishing the financial infrastructure through Whitfield Stinnett Development, and positioning him to serve as the operational manager when the actual theft ring was activated. But Stinnett's handwriting appeared in the operational notebook only after the initial planning phase. The early strategic framework, the site selection process, the vulnerability assessment methodology, the financial projections, was entirely in Catherine Whitfield's handwriting, which meant Catherine Whitfield had conceived the operation. Derek Stinnett had been recruited to execute it. Keene then pulled the final piece, the bank records for Meridian Properties over the entire 18-month period. The account showed regular deposits from Nordic Import Consulting, with withdrawals matching documented payments to salvage yards and operational expenses. But the account also showed 3 large wire transfers, each for $25,000, sent to a personal account registered in the name of Derek Stinnett. The transfers had been made quarterly, corresponding to the quarterly payments Meridian Properties received from Nordic Import Consulting. They suggested that Stinnett was receiving a percentage of the operation's profits, his compensation for managing the day-to-day coordination. But Catherine Whitfield, as the account holder for Meridian Properties, controlled those transfers. She was the one who had access to the funds. She was the one authorizing the payments. Keene reviewed the computer login records one final time. The remote logins from Stinnett's residential address showed access times and durations. Stinnett was logging in to check email, review financial transfers, and communicate with international contacts. But he was not initiating transactions. He was monitoring them. Catherine Whitfield, whose personal account showed the systematic accumulation of $400,000 to $500,000 in suspicious deposits over 5 years, was the director of the operation. She had conceived it. She had recruited her contacts: Stinnett, Ashford, Garrison, Oaks. She had established the international supply chain. She had overseen the transition from Whitfield Stinnett Development to Meridian Properties. And when the investigation began closing in, she had disappeared. Keene called Foster at the FBI field office. "I've identified the operator," Keene said. "Catherine Whitfield. She established the infrastructure, recruited the personnel, and coordinated with the international buyers. Derek Stinnett is her subordinate, the operational manager, but not the architect." "How are you certain?" Foster asked. "The strategic planning is in her handwriting. The financial controls are through her accounts. The relationships predate the operation by years. And she has $500,000 in unexplained deposits over the past 5 years. That's not a manager's take. That's an operator's profit. Whitfield has disappeared. We have no current location. She'll surface, Keynes said. The operation requires her. The international buyers contact Meridian North. The accounts are registered in her name. Without her, the network collapses. She'll establish a new operation, a new location, a new company structure. And when she does, the pattern will repeat. Keene hung up and filed his final report. The investigation had established that Catherine Whitfield had operated a systematic theft operation spanning multiple construction sites across the region, coordinating with site operatives to steal materials worth approximately $38,000 per theft. The stolen materials had been funneled through salvage yards into international commerce, eventually reaching construction projects in Central America, where they were incorporated into buildings that would never have been financially viable using legitimate material costs. The operation had generated approximately $400,000 to $500,000 annually in profit, primarily benefiting Whitfield and her subordinates. The infrastructure suggested the operation could scale substantially. The documents recovered from Meridian Properties indicated plans to expand to 6 to 8 sites per quarter, generating annual revenues of $450,000 to $600,000. Catherine Whitfield had conceived and directed this operation over years of planning, recruitment, and infrastructure development. She had transformed her failed construction management business into a sophisticated international supply chain, converting stolen materials into untraceable commerce. And she had been thorough enough to disappear before arrest, suggesting she understood the investigation would eventually converge on her identity. The case was solvable. The evidence was substantial. But the perpetrator, the woman who had architected the entire operation, remained beyond immediate reach, likely establishing new false identities, new companies, new international contacts in some jurisdiction where financial oversight was minimal. Keene filed the report on Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, state police and FBI agents were interviewing Derek Stennett, examining his computer access logs, freezing his accounts, and building the case against him. But they were prosecuting the subordinate, not the architect. Catherine Whitfield, who had disappeared, was already building the next operation. The pattern, once established, could be replicated endlessly. And unless she committed a procedural error, left a document unburned, made a call from an unsecured phone associated with a known contact, she would remain invisible, generating profit through systematic theft in some other jurisdiction, some other construction site, some other salvage yard. Keene closed the file and returned to his other cases.